Nobody cares. All right, it is 6:31, and I will, thank you, Phil. I will call us to order for our July 18th Planning Board meeting, and I will begin by reading the roll. John, myself, I'm present. Sue?
Here.
Phil?
Yep.
Neil?
Present.
Mike?
Yep.
Mark?
Yep.
And Matt?
Present.
All right, and alternates, Zach is not present. Michael Bouchard?
Present.
Peter? Any alternates as voting members this evening? However, you are more than welcome to join in the conversation. First up, review of minutes, and before we all chime in on this, I just want to say, Joseph, assuming you're the one doing this, thank you for the very thorough and lengthy minutes for a long and complicated meeting.
Thank you.
That was good.
Thank you. I actually have a suggested correction.
Oh, you do?
Yes, so I've lost the page number, but in describing the board's signature of the revised subdivision regulations, I believe I referred to them as site plan review regulations instead of subdivision regulations, based on my last.
I had the digital copy in front of me. I could just do Control F or something.
Mm-hmm. It was one of the earlier pages, maybe page 2. So, yeah.
Maybe you're not old enough to be blessed with those 2 a.m. thoughts yet.
I think I've had it my entire life. Although maybe I could have been born old though.
I get it, you're right.
I woke up at 4:30 thinking about the ordinance.
I know I do. Sorry, Sue. I just had a suspicion.
Right.
I'm not going to make a motion because I wasn't here.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as corrected of June 20th.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes, and any further discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain?
All right, so the minutes are approved. Thank you, everyone. Communications received. I know there have been a couple of things related to our applications. Joseph?
Yeah, definitely. So, actually, all of the items on the agenda have communication, so apologies for a couple of last-minute emails to the board over the last couple of days. But we did hear from Mountain Village Charter School with regards to the continued compliance hearing scheduled for tonight. And long story short, they've asked for 2 more months that the board would continue their compliance hearing until September. And then we also heard from Martha Swats, the property owner behind the Yetton Road development, who asked that, who advised that there's been a little bit of progress on determining what the changes to the plan would be, but those are not ready yet. So it seems that another continuance is also sought in that case. There's a desire to remove the second story of the building. So certainly we can add that to the list. And then Judy Barrett provided this draft inclusionary housing ordinance that as a discussion item for the board. She will be here tonight. She's on her way. And she says, apologies that it came out so soon, so close to the meeting, but she wants to talk it through anyway as the grant gets close to the end here. But just as she, would also like to discuss kind of the wrap up of that, this HOP grant. So those were the communications for tonight. Those 3.
All right, thank you.
Can I ask a question related to the HOP grant?
You may.
My understanding is that we're applying for a subsequent round of funding for the HOP grant. Is that correct?
That is, yeah, so the board did discuss that last meeting and discussed applying for round 2, which, as we understand it anyway, is designed to favor previous grantees. That's kind of the intended purpose, is to give more money to people who did work under the first round of HOP grants. So I would imagine Plymouth being one of the earlier recipients, you know, not in a bad position to compete for that funding. But yes, I guess to answer your question, that's,
And has there been discussion of retaining Barrett if we are to do that, or
Not,
do we have to go
not
discuss
yet.
again?
And, I mean, technically, we should probably wait until we find out if we receive the money and all that.
Yeah.
In many ways, it would seem like, for certain reasons at least, a very good decision insofar as the learning curve of
Continuity.
bringing someone new in
That's my thought.
wouldn't have to happen.
Right.
So that whoever we brought in, if it was Barrett, would be able to get to work in much more detail, much faster.
That's my thought as well.
Um,
They've been great. You know, as we're talking about wrapping up this project, I kind of wonder how much sense it makes to put too much effort into this if there's a possibility that we might continue the work.
Well, I guess the one thing there is, there were things that we kind of contractually agreed to.
Right. Yeah, and it's good to
And-
fulfill those.
yeah.
For sure.
And then we can start with kind of a clean slate on new things, which might involve some continuity, obviously, but,
Yeah. Thank you.
and they did make other recommendations that we didn't really address at this point. And one of which we're thinking about is a kind of broader cleanup of our regulations that would help with housing, among other things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
oh, and I guess I can update the board. Scott and I did meet with the new Lakes Region Planning Commission Executive Director, Shanna Saunders. She's just, within the last 3 weeks, joined Lakes Region Planning as the new Executive Director. And she is really excited to reemphasize some of the planning focus areas that LRPC can work on, like working with towns to do master planning assistance and other types of planning assistance. So certainly, she's just joined. You know, I'm sure if going forward, though, the town is looking, the planning board is looking into some bigger planning initiatives. I'm sure, from the sound of it, Lakes Region Planning would be interested in discussing those with the board.
It's good to hear. I'm very happy to have her on board.
She was very enthusiastic, really, seems like she
I've
has a lot.
had a couple of conversations. She seems very sharp.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right, and so we have some applications and public hearings. No new applications, 2 public hearings though, and we've heard a kind of preview of both of them already from Joseph and the communications received. So we have a continuation of a public hearing for the Yetton Road development. And so I'm actually gonna, which one is it? Not this one, it's this one. It's rather brief, so I'm gonna read the whole thing. Just to kind of update us here. We don't have anybody online or anything representing Yetton Road, right?
No, not at this point.
I have met with the architect, so this is Martha Swats, owner administrator. I have met with the architect and site planner engineer requesting changes to the plan to remove the second story on both buildings. This would make the site commercial only for affordability. Their changes have not been submitted yet. So that's what we've heard, so we do not have anything new for this evening. We should still officially hold a public hearing and presumably continue that public hearing. Looking at this, I don't know if we want to have this conversation tonight or at a continuation when the applicant's here, probably better. We were talking about how substantial the changes might be and if that would warrant a new application or not. Certainly a re-notification of abutters, if not a new application, and it looks pretty significant. And so, I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts or comments about any of this before we officially open a public hearing, probably close it
I
pretty
was
quickly.
just wondering how that would work, where we approved it with the apartments on top and the building on the bottom. Does that all have to start over, or do we?
Well, that's the question. I mean, there can be changes during the process, these are pretty significant changes.
Change, though.
And this might warrant a new application. And if she does so, she might be able to request waiving the fees. Maybe not the notification fees, but the other fees. But that's not us, that's select board. And so we really have no control over that part. But I don't know if we want to have that conversation this evening, or we want to wait for the actual developer to be here, which might be better. To say, like, do we actually just want a new application at this point? Because it is a lot different than what we initially approved.
Well, we don't know what their changes are, so I don't know that it might
We
be
could just do a continuation again.
fair to let them present what they're gonna present.
Are the buildings on the same pads?
Um,
We don't know.
I don't think we have
Yes.
anything, right?
Correct, yeah, so that she states that new plans are being drawn up, but we don't have them yet. So,
You wouldn't happen to have any sense outside of this communication for the timeline, would you? So we know she would just continue to the next
yeah, so,
hearing?
no, long story short, no, I don't. I will say, just for a little bit of background, last month, the board, as far as the review timeline, for making a decision, the board has given a couple of extensions to that. Last meeting, the board gave a 65-day extension of the review timeline, which means that the last meeting within the current review timeline of this application, barring another extension, is next meeting, so August's planning board meeting.
Yeah.
If the board continues to August, you're still within that 65. If the board wanted to go beyond August, it would just take another extension mutually agreed upon beyond, that 65-day extension that was given at the last meeting.
So all we need is a 1-month extension at this point.
Unless the board wanted to do otherwise, but as far as, we don't have the revised plans at this point, and per the owner, she's discussed them with her site planner and engineer and asked them to make the changes, but they haven't been finished yet, so we don't know exactly what they look like.
I'm thinking we should continue this to the next month,
Yeah.
and if at that time we don't have sufficient information, I'm in favor of denying the application, only because sufficient time has elapsed, that the plans are gonna be different, the abutters it's probably falling off the radar of any abutter who has been noticed. We could have had abutters who've moved away and new abutters who haven't been noticed. There's a reason for the timeliness of the application process, and we're getting outside of that, in my opinion, so I would.
And denial without prejudice or anything for insufficient information.
Right, and I
Yeah.
think, and encourage them to apply again when they have complete application documents
Mhm.
prepared.
So for now, though, a continuation probably.
Yeah, I would
And before we get there,
recommend
we should officially hold a public hearing.
we have members of the public available.
Um,
May I ask a question?
yeah, you may.
This letter from DES regarding the plan asking to revise to further avoid or minimize wetland impacts, has that been addressed already by the applicant?
So the applicant decided not to pay for their engineer to do a review because they knew they were gonna change their plans.
Okay.
So that's all kind of just in limbo right now,
Okay.
and,
Great. So the plans that were attached to the email and are in Google Drive may not be relevant anymore?
they probably will not be very relevant going forward.
Which is why,
Ex-
and those are the same plans that have been provided to abutters who were noticed
Yeah.
at this meeting, so.
Okay,
And the extent to which they're not relevant anymore is the real issue, if,
Right.
whether it's a new application or potentially a pretty prolonged continuation, continuance. Yeah,
So, the last time the abutters were notified with the initial notification was when Brian was working with the planning board, pre-June Hammond, correct?
well, no, for this particular application, by this applicant, and all the plans that we saw, that would have been in the spring sometime. I forgot what the exact date would have been.
Yeah, the
This
application was first heard on the 21st of March, so they would have been sent out about 10 days before March 21st. Typically, we do like the
As Molly
Thursday.
pointed out, the application was received on February 29th.
That makes sense. And then a couple days after that, probably.
All right, so it is 6:47, and I will open a public hearing. Would any members of the public like to speak? If you would. Or on Zoom, please do so.
Are the two participants us?
Yes, yep, just 2 town halls.
So if no members of the public would like to speak, I would entertain a motion for continuance, perhaps?
I move that we continue to the, oh man, August meeting. Do we have a date for the August meeting?
We do. It's the 15th, is that?
August when?
15th, that looks like.
15?
Believe
I move
so.
that we continue to August 15th.
Second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, the motion passes. We are continued to August 15th on this application. All right. So next, we have the continuation of the compliance hearing for Mountain Village Charter School. And this had to do with lighting and sidewalks, walkways, and this is also a fairly short correspondence here, so I might as well just read it. So, I'm trying to think, do we any? So I'll just read both of them, they're both pretty short. So this is Delaney Carrier from Mountain Village Charter School. Thank you for reaching out to us. We still do not have any updates to share. We do finally have a builder working on the plans for our project and hope to have made progress soon. Can we again continue our compliance hearing to a later date? What is the maximum amount of time that we have before we need to demonstrate real progress? And the following day, we would like to request a 2-month continuance to the September meeting. Thank you, Delaney Carrier. I will remind everyone that I actually recused myself from this applicant's application. And if anybody wants to do the formality just for either the vice chair or the non-recording secretary
You
of
did it last time, didn't you?
opening a public hearing and continuing this
Who
perhaps.
can do it?
Bill can do it. He did it the last time. He's okay. Carry on.
All right, having received the gavel from Sue, I will take over the hearing since John has recused himself. So we do have a request from the applicant to continue to the September meeting, and we do have an outstanding question that we need to respond to, but I believe that's kind of administrative, but we in our notes, we issued conditional approval to the site plan review application on January 18th. We would have to review our terms and conditions for when we initiated that they would have to have active and substantial development, right?
Yeah,
Did we-
so
Did we go with the default 1 year? Did we give them an extension on that?
Yeah, correct. So at that point, it was the 1-year default timeline for conditions, 2 years for active and substantial development.
Thank you for the clarification.
Mhm.
That was what I was wondering. So we should remind them that, of the terms of the initial decision regarding meeting terms and when they need to make active and substantial development. So, does anyone from the board want to discuss anything before we open a public hearing on this topic? Hearing none, I will open the public hearing at 6:53 and ask if anyone from the public would like to comment on the continued application for Mountain Village Charter School. All right, our 2 members of the public have said no. I will close the public hearing at the same time. All right, and I will ask the board for a motion on how we'd like to handle this. Do we want to grant their requested continuance to the September meeting.
Yeah. Make a motion that we continue it to the September.
And
Second.
do we need to clarify the date or?
Let me find that for you. So September meeting is the 19th.
So the motion is to continue this to the September 19th meeting, and we have a second? Is there any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, and with that, we will continue this to the September 19th meeting, and John, you can rejoin us if you'd like. Pass the gavel back.
Have a new board member question. Is there actually a site plan for this somewhere, or is it just an application?
There is.
Yes.
There were a couple
that-
of
that it right there?
copies up there, but it's unchanged since what the board initially approved. So I just gave the small copies, but the, certainly the
It's all
digital
new to me.
copies- Yeah, no, understandable.
Thank you.
We also have the digital copies, which I can certainly make available as well. We don't have a chair for Judy.
Oh, we got a
Have an
full,
extra board member
house here.
tonight. so-
Hi, Judy.
We can probably pull up one of the,
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
all right, so informational and pre-application reviews. No, doesn't seem that way. Wasn't expecting any. Other business from members of the board and planning staff. So we have three things on my kind of sightlines here. One is probably gonna be a quick one. Do we have any updates, Joseph, on the proposed ZBA meeting? Joint meeting?
Yes, good. Yeah, thank you for the reminder on that. I will find that now. So they weren't able to do the last requested date, so the zoning board asked for. September was the recommendation from the zoning
It's our
board
September work session?
for work session. Yep.
Okay. That would work for me.
You have a date?
That would be, yep, that would be September 5th.
And that would be at a regularly scheduled time. So presumably, if we can have a quorum, we can do that meeting. So it's, I mean, it seems like it would work for us, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fine.
All right, sounds good. And let's see, let's go back to my notes here. So I did want to, I'm kind of gonna jump forward just for one sec. The other thing I want to talk about before we get to Judy is, and I'll talk about this after she presents what she's provided for us today. I do want to talk about, Joseph sent the message that New Hampshire OPD is hosting its webinar. It's zoning time. And I do want to talk about a little bit about our master plan and zoning ordinance and potential amendments this year, if any, that we might want to consider. And I just want to say a few words about that tonight, a little bit later, just to kind of prime the pump, not to really have a full-blown discussion, but maybe for our work session next August, we can have that discussion. Anyway, so we did get a document this evening from Judy, and so we should probably talk about that a little bit. So as far as the HOP grant goes, it's winding down at this point, our timeline. And The two pieces that we were still, had discussed as a committee and as a board, receiving were the inclusionary zoning and the Tenny Mountain, plans. I'll just leave it, kind of vague for now. And so I think we can talk briefly about both of those this evening. And, you want me to say anything else to introduce this, or do you want to kind of jump in and introduce?
Whatever you
Okay.
say is fine.
So, yeah, so those two pieces, I guess we can start with the document you gave us, which is the inclusionary zoning. And so that is something we talked about. As a committee and board, we seemed like we might be able to go either way, but while we had a consultant, we certainly thought it would be worth getting the language. And since there was definitely some interest in the town and on the board and the committee, even if we don't push it through this year, we'd still have the language ready to go if we, felt ambitious and wanted to think about that. And since our goal is to provide for affordability, it seems like it could be a good opportunity to provide a tool that, as I understand it, would increase, give some density bonuses, probably, in return for affordable units. And as per New Hampshire RSA's and state law, we can't mandate somebody follow this. It's an opt-in sort of thing. And with that, I'll turn it over. I'll admit myself, I haven't even looked at it yet.
Well, you didn't get it
And,
until,
yeah.
so I don't hold that against anybody. I
So if you want to walk us through it a little bit, maybe.
just couldn't get it to you any sooner. So we looked at,
Do you want to come to the table maybe and grab a pull up a chair?
There you go.
Thank you, Joseph.
Yes.
We only have one member of the public, we could invite him up too.
thank you, sorry.
There you go.
You take your space there. We looked at 4 or 5 of these from towns, just to get a sense of how people are dealing with this here. And the experiences seem to be all over the lot. So I tried to pull from ones that seem to make the most sense to me. And, I'm willing to do whatever you want with this. But essentially what it almost is like an overlay district, where if you're in one of the districts provided for in the draft ordinance, which would be multifamily, agricultural, village commercial, or highway commercial, places where you currently allow multifamily, either as of right or by special exception or conditional use, that if you're in one of those districts, then you could do an inclusionary project, which would qualify you for additional density in exchange for providing some affordable units. So the definition of affordable is in the back, because we suggested that that would be an appropriate place to put it, is in the definitions. It's so hard. Every time I pick up your ordinance, I want to just fix it. And I don't mean anything to do with housing. I mean just fixing the ordinance because it's so disorganized. But be that as it may, there are definitions here to help make use of this draft ordinance. So there's affordable owner occupied, there's affordable rental. The reason for those distinctions is that your state's workforce housing law does separate ownership and rental for purposes of income limits. So you need to kind of provide clarity as to what you're looking for. The definitions in here that have to do with income and assets and so forth really have to do with how someone is income qualified to purchase or rent an affordable unit. So it is a conditional use permit, so the planning board controls it. Any kind of residential use that's allowed in the district where the project's being proposed could be proposed. I think the thing to focus on that I think probably is really worth a conversation, assuming you even want to do this, is how the density bonus works. So what this is saying, this is breaking down rental and ownership into different categories of density bonus, recognizing that the lower the income range served, the the sort of less burden you put on the project, if you will, the percentage of units is lower. And then when you get into moderate income, ownership units, the density bonus kind of goes up. Now, I will tell you that most of the ones I looked at don't do this. There was a method to my madness. Most of these are essentially, if you're doing 15% low mod, you're getting 15% inclusionary, market rate density bonus. I tried to tip this up on ownership because all I've heard here from working in this town for the last 15 months is that what people seem to care the most about is providing for affordable home ownership. So I tried to make the density bonus a little heftier on that side of things. There are requirements the developer would have to meet if the developer were going to propose a development like this. I think the most important piece, aside from making sure the income limits and the density bonus actually make sense, is some system to make sure that the units actually stay affordable. So there is a provision in the ordinance that a developer who wants to sign on for this has to provide for some monitoring effort. So typically the way this works is that for homeownership units, when they are sold, the buyer has to be income eligible. What happens with the buyer once they've bought the unit is irrelevant. You don't want to put people in a situation where they've bought a home and they can't make more money. So it's at the point of sale that income eligibility is determined for a homeownership unit. For rental, it's determined on an annual basis. So whatever the developer is going to do, there has to be some way for the town to verify that the density you granted in exchange for getting those affordable units actually provides the public benefit that was intended, which of course is the affordable housing. So typically the way this works is that the developer, and this is what this draft says, the developer has to find an entity, it's typically like a nonprofit CDC or development organization, that they have to provide funding for to do the monitoring. So it's not that the town is expected to take this on, because you can't, nobody does, unless you're Nashua or Manchester or Concord or something. They have different capacity. So the developer retains, at the planning board's approval, a qualified nonprofit to do the monitoring and basically puts money in a fund to pay that entity to do the monitoring, and just places the responsibility on the developer to provide annual reports or reports upon resale of the ownership units, so you know that the units are actually staying affordable. And that's what it is. It's just it's simple. Is it super productive? No. A lot of developers don't want to get into this. First of all, the conditional use permit's scary. Second, the economics have to work, and I think that's the most important piece. If they can't get enough additional market rate units to essentially subsidize the affordable units, because there's no other subsidy in these projects. So there has to be enough market rate sales or rental to support the affordable units. And unless the ordinance does that, then you're probably not going to see anything. So there's a conversation, I think, to be had about what really do you want to accomplish with this. A simpler way to do it is to simply say, I'm just going to make up a number here. I want 15% affordable units, and for every one affordable units, a developer gets, say, 2 or 3 market rate units. It just makes the math a lot easier. So, there's different ways to skin the cat, so to speak, but I want you to at least have something to react to. And before I go any further on this, I am planning to come back on September 8th, despite the fact that I will technically not be under contract anymore. And I can come on the 8th if you want me to. Is it the 8th or the 5th? What's that first Thursday?
5th.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you. I'm going to come back on the 5th because I want to clean this up. And if there's going to be a Tenny Mountain overlay, I need to get you a draft really next week, and then we need time to talk about it. So I can't come in August. I've just got conflicting stuff going on, including the fact that I normally have a third Thursday commitment. So I can come back on the 5th of September if you want me to, and we can kind of finish cleaning these things up. But deliverables-wise, I will have everything to you before the end of next week.
I think that would be fantastic, and I appreciate that you're able to do that.
Sure, it's fine.
Mike?
On selling a income-based home.
Yep.
the family buys it, their income goes up, they're not kicked out, they can still live there. They then sell it, the income has to be in there again.
So the
It's in
deed
perpetuity.
the deed restriction follows the unit. There is a, New Hampshire does this differently from some other states. You actually allow, under your kind of standard restriction, the owner can recoup more of the equity growth than if they simply had to limit it to the affordable, what someone who was in that income range could afford. It's allowed to ride up a little bit,
So they miss out on
gaining the full equity.
gaining the full equity.
Because they bought the house at
Yeah.
lower than market value.
But would it be in proportion to what a non-income-based house might be?
If the
If you're
unit's
starting
going to,
low-
if the unit's going to remain affordable, there has to be a way for a subsequent moderate income buyer to buy that unit. So you can't just ride it up based on the percentage of what's actually happened in the market.
So from our last housing meeting, there seemed to be a lot, and we love the idea, well, I don't want to speak for just myself, but the housing committee was in agreement, it appeared, that we love the idea of being able to give some sort of bonus for a developer. And we love the idea of an organic type of bonus, where rather than having someone at the town monitor all this, whether it's select board or planning board, that it was, rather than income-based, size-based. So they got, if they did 10 lots, maybe they got 3 extra lots where the house couldn't be any bigger than 800 square feet, which organically lowered the price compared to a 3,000 square foot home in the neighborhood. And my question would be, if we did an organic type of bonus, is there a way to prevent the home, the 3,000 square foot home, from buying the 800 square foot right next to it as their,
STR, their short-term rental?
no, their guest house? Because we want to
Or short-term
create,
rental. Seriously, like that's happening in neighborhoods throughout town.
is there a way to prevent that if we do give that bonus of an 8? Because we want to make housing, not give more housing to some.
So I guess you have to be clear about what the objectives are of the ordinance. If you are trying to provide housing that is below market so that people who are in a moderate income range can live in your community, then you are going to have to accept that there is a deed restriction that's going to follow that unit upon resale. And the unit is not going to sell at market value at the next point when someone buys it again. That's just not going to happen under an inclusionary zoning ordinance. If you want to just create a density bonus for small units, you can do that. But as for putting a restriction on what someone does with it, I don't know how legally you would do that.
That's my
Judy,
question.
Yeah,
Can I
Yeah,
ask just a summary question?
Sure.
So if I understand this correctly, that the deed restriction would ensure that a resale of the house would have to meet the same definitions of affordability, so that the selling price would actually be defined by what's affordable to the area median income. So let's say housing prices go up by 50%, but the area median income only goes up by 25%.
Right.
The price of that house can only go up by 25% to meet that affordability.
It has to be affordable to someone in that income range.
Right.
That's the rationale for the density bonus, is the preservation of affordability. Which you can't really do even for the 800 square foot house, which does maybe some other public benefit. So I'm not knocking that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't guarantee affordability. I mean, we've seen that in plenty of markets. So you have to decide what you want to do with something like
I've
this.
been thinking about zoning, this is an aside, but I'm actually wondering if we should if we should propose a short-term rental policy for town
Yeah, I've wondered about that too.
before it becomes more of an issue.
Right.
I mean, it would have to go in front of the voters, but I think that this town would be receptive to the concept.
You should let me know if you want us to add that to the bucket before we're done.
Judy,
You're the
is,
grant manager. Do we want Judy to add that to the bucket?
I'm not sure I am the grant manager. I think Joseph has been,
I think it's the collective of the planning board and the housing committee.
Is that something you could throw a couple examples or drafts of?
One
I
thing,
can't do it before the end of next week, but I
Yeah.
can do it in August.
and one
I was
thing I
before
will,
the September
I
meeting.
was, oh,
one
yeah.
thing to say though is that officially this grant does terminate at the end of this month. So,
Right.
you know, the contract with Barrett has been to provide us this and the Tenny Mountain. You know, there's not,
So that's outside the scope.
it would be outside,
Okay.
I believe it would be outside of the
Why don't-
scope.
We've already agreed upon what's gonna conclude this
That's fine.
grant
Why don't
agreement.
we leave that for if there's a
Hop two.
continued top grant and we
Hop
can
to
look at
it.
it in the future.
But you're gonna want that before you start. And I'm not being debated, I'm not arguing with you, I'm just saying, I think you wanna think about the whole picture. So if you're going to do, density for small units, then you wanna think about how much do you wanna risk that stock to become short-term rentals.
Right.
Well,
Which is a real,
Is there a way that's legal to say it has to be a primary home? Is there any avenue to do that?
yeah, that's what short-term rental zoning ordinances do.
So the beauty of,
Just the density ones.
The beauty of the affordable housing restriction is that the unit must be the principal residence of the buyer or the tenant.
So I have two comments here, or a comment and a question. One is, I think a lot of what we did in the OSRD will make those sort of smaller, denser units that are more naturally affordable possible, and in a pretty straightforward way, if somebody wants to take that advantage of that. I was also thinking about in town what we already have, and correct me if I'm wrong, Habitat, I believe, uses deed restrictions. Is
They
that
do
correct?
what Judy is talking
Yeah.
about.
And there seems to be a good amount of support in town for Habitat. And so we already have examples of this model being used in town, and effectively so. And I don't know if they personally want more density necessarily, but we do have developers in town who are already working with deed restrictions for income, and it's not something that's really hitting us out of the blue like we've never seen this before.
But Habitat for Humanity handles that in perpetuity.
That's.
And the town would not handle ours.
No, we would have to handle it. and
No, we would not.
No,
It would be
It's
handled through an
illegal.
outside nonprofit or
don't
something.
take that on.
On page 3 on
Yeah,
417.
you don't have to
not
take that
9,
on, Mike.
You know,
Because that was one of the warnings that June gave us, is not to get involved with that if
That
we
would
don't
not be
have to.
us.
that'd be a night.
Well, it could be us, but we don't have to do that. And this language does not say we do, because it would be too much.
Right.
But the capacity of the town would.
Yeah.
Well, most small towns don't take this on, Mike. They just don't. I mean, there's nonprofits that do this kind of thing. They do it day in and day out. Sometimes I think for rental projects, New Hampshire Housing may actually have trained monitors that they will provide, but you don't need to worry about, you need to worry about compliance, but you don't need to worry about the town needing to have the capacity to monitor these, because someone else is gonna do that and give you a report. That's the point.
Seems
So-
like a system that makes a lot of sense according to other types of social
Enforcement.
welfare projects, like Medicaid, for example. Makes a lot of sense to me.
I mean, I think you really have to decide what you want to do as a policy basis. I mean, I don't think there's any question that there's a need. The question is whether there's a want, and that want has to get decided here.
I like Phil's idea that maybe we do need to start investigating limitations on short-term rentals.
I
Look
agree.
at that.
Which is separate.
That's a separate issue, though.
Which is separate, but it could be in conjunction with a density bonus, an organic density bonus of smaller units.
I think they're separate issues, but they would affect each other, but
Right.
I
Would
think,
affect each
I
other.
think we should be considering a short-term rental policy just so that the town has, I mean, there are already properties in town that are being used as short-term
I
rentals.
guess there are.
And that would open up a ton of housing for people that would want to live
Potentially.
year-round.
I don't think it's a ton yet in Plymouth. I think
There are a
we're
few.
far behind a lot of neighboring towns.
I'm guessing a couple hundred.
I mean, I would guess that there are probably several ADUs in town that are being used
Yes.
as, that could be apartments, that are probably a better income stream as short-term rentals. But if short-term rentals were somehow limited, those would be forced to become real apartments for people.
I mean, I look at this and say, regulating short-term rentals, good idea. Allowing for smaller, denser units, I think that's a good idea, and I think in many ways we've already started to provide for that. This is something separate, I think, and it's, given that it's not and can't even legally be mandatory in this state, it's an opt-in sort of thing, it gives developers another opportunity. And if they don't want to take it, they don't take it, and if they do, it's really on them to make sure they get a nonprofit to do compliance, and it's really not on us. And it seems like a win-win. I mean, I'm not sure anybody will use it, but if they do, it's another tool for them.
For what it's worth, I mean, I don't see a lot of developers putting up subdivisions in this area. I mean, I see onesie-twosie houses going up on existing lots. I mean, you know, as much as I appreciate the intent of this, I'm not sure that it will come into play very.
Well, it doesn't open up the floodgates anywhere, because it's just not economically
Right.
attractive.
Yeah, I think, you know, what we're talking about is making the cost of land more affordable.
That's right,
That is a small portion of the cost of housing.
that's right.
And the cost of housing is not affordable for most people. And it's really not about, we can make the land cost 50% less, but like, when you go to buy a house that's been built, the land cost is a small portion of that.
Right.
Like,
The market, it's all gonna be the market, you
Yeah.
know, if the cost of construction comes down, then something like this becomes more attractive.
Right.
You know, without subsidy, and I think that's a key difference in New Hampshire, is that like ownership development generally doesn't get subsidized, so the market has to make it work.
I mean, and for me, like, I don't think this alone will, like, change someone's mind, but we've done a bunch of other things to make development slightly more affordable and easier to achieve, and adding one more tool to that toolbox for developers. It's not gonna be the silver bullet, but I think giving another option for making things work a little bit better, if they choose to go that route.
Yep, and this isn't giving up a lot. The bonuses aren't egregious. You know, they're.
No, I agree. I just think we should keep this in perspective. That just, you know, these changes we're making are going to provide a small incentive for
Around the
developers
margins.
to do this. But, you know, we may still see developers come in and buy a 50-acre parcel and turn it into 10 5-acre lots, and they won't care about this at all. You know, that may be what sells in
And we
this
can't
town.
stop them from that.
No, we can't.
I
And
mean,
that-
my optimism is that I don't think any of the changes we've made so far in the last couple of years are huge, but cumulatively, we've made a lot of them.
Yeah.
And taken together with the OSRD, with some of the units per acre changes and all that, maybe adding this into the mix, you can actually work that into something
How,
helpful.
how does this work? So you see, everybody puts their house on Zillow, and then you see this house that goes on Zillow. Is there a big banner that says income based? I mean, how does that work?
Typically, there is an entity that's overseeing the sale.
So it never shows up on Zillow type
No, I
of
didn't
thing?
say it wouldn't show up on Zillow, but there's typically an entity that's marketing the unit
I would think that
to potentially income-eligible buyers.
you'd probably have to say, you have realtors would have to know that like there
Oh,
are
sure.
income limitations on purchasers for this
Yeah,
property.
I mean, that's
this
true
would-
with rentals too. I mean, it's just, I'm sorry,
Oh, please go ahead.
just, you know, income limit supply, and that's
Yeah.
about all the ads ever say.
Right,
I mean, you're not
Okay.
inventing the wheel here.
right.
I,
And as a marketer, if you were to market this as, you know, if a real estate agent was marketing this publicly, which we assume it would be, it almost would be guaranteed that it would be fully disclosed, because the amount of calls, just per se, if it was not disclosed up front,
Yeah.
that this is market-based, would be overwhelming to
Sure,
feel.
sure.
right, and real estate agents aren't gonna typically get it's gonna be this nonprofit that's
No,
gonna
I-
be showing, no?
Oh, no.
Is this still in the market?
Oh, real estate, there are real estate agents who love this kind of thing.
Okay, but
Because
they're
it's-
not the ones qualifying the buyers,
No,
are
no,
they?
no, they're not. That's,
Okay.
that's good. But there are realtors who love to do affordable housing. I mean, there just are.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the concern. I think it's making sure there's an entity that's qualified to review for income eligibility.
And here's the thing, like, in the end, they won't get as much resale value, but they'll actually have a house.
Yeah.
Right, and we find, you know, a lot of these units don't turn over that much because people's income doesn't necessarily accelerate, you know, the way it would have to in order to make a true market sale feasible. So,
Right.
you know, you're creating a home for someone who otherwise may not be able to buy a home at all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that,
if you asked Habitat for Humanity the past 30 years, how many of their homes have been relisted and, you know, the initial occupants have moved on to something else, I would expect that that number would be extremely low.
right.
Now, with Habitat for Humanity, you can buy it out and it leaves the system. As far as, I think that's how it was explained to me.
I've never heard
But they
that.
have to pay the part of the loan that's held back. And if you want to sell it for full price, you have to pay that amount. That's the way it was explained.
I've never heard that on a Habitat project.
don't
Maybe,
know,
maybe
maybe.
your Habitat for Humanity works differently here, but
That's
I-
how Frank explained it to me, but I could be wrong in how I interpret it.
I have never heard that. I mean, they're relying on volunteer labor and so forth to build these homes.
Yeah.
I
get-
mean,
they get
if
a
you
lot
can
of-
find a Habitat home that's sold at market and someone's paid it back, tell me, because I'd love to know about that example.
I'll get him to explain it again and I'll,
Yeah, please share that clarification, because I'd be
yeah.
interested in
There's a way to pay off the part that's held back to make it affordable.
and relieve that deeded section to
And then,
the market.
but if you try and sell it for full price, you gotta then pay back all that money with interest, which makes it difficult, but it's possible.
And then you have to buy a market rate house, which is more expensive than
I don't know.
than the inexpensive one you just sold too.
Interesting.
But I know they're holding back a loan, so that you're,
The mortgage is their enforcement tool.
whatever's held back, that you
That's
never
their
have to pay.
enforcement tool. Yeah, it's a
Yes,
second, it's like
that
a
is
deferred
what it
payment
is.
loan. It's their deferred payment loan.
Yes, yep.
Interesting.
So, you know, I'm not expecting everybody to either say, I love this, I hate this, or whatever. I mean,
I think
think
there's a
about
lot,
it.
there's a lot of good here.
Yeah, and I'm happy to make any changes to this you want. I just wanted to get an example in front of you that I could actually
I
think might
do-
make sense here.
Potentially like the idea that you floated of the density bonuses being in more of a per unit form.
Yeah,
potentially.
I think the simpler way to do it is just to say, look, we want 10% affordable units, and for every affordable unit, we're gonna give you, count them, 2 or 3 market rate units. That actually, you're not gonna get a lot of affordable housing on it, but you're gonna get some, because people are gonna want those market rate units. So, again, it's what are you trying to accomplish? Do you wanna sort of hold out for more affordability, or do you wanna get some affordable units truly in a mixed income project?
Sometimes just creating new housing that's not affordable allows people in the community to move,
I know. that's
leaving
right.
their existing housing, which is affordable,
Yeah,
right?
that's
So
true.
sometimes people in the community just want a newer, bigger house, and they vacate this home that's been that's still affordable for some people.
Or renters who are currently rent in this town, who might love to own a home,
Right.
but not with the prices you've got here.
The renters in this kind of situation, if their income goes up and they're no longer income qualified, they essentially have to leave.
That's, so, yes, for renters, that's true. For owners, it's not true.
I just had a phone call from someone who incomed out of their apartment.
It happens. They have to go to a market rate unit.
They're probably
You should
Again.
congratulate them
Yeah,
on
I
their,
mean-
on their success.
Exactly. I mean, that's my view. It's
Seriously.
like if
probably
their
scared to
income
get
goes
that
up.
raise.
There's a fine line though between
Yeah.
the gap between,
know.
oh, I now make, $1,000 over the income limit, but that's not enough to then afford.
I know.
Something
Oh, I
else.
am very well aware of that. It's a
Yeah.
real challenge for
Yeah.
families that want to be able to buy or move into a, potentially larger unit or something. And
So-
there are income limits for a reason, but they are what they are. It's
Well, a big
just,
challenge is actually if you are in a place and your child ages out of being a child.
Right.
Oh, yeah, it's
That
another
can
one.
actually throw you out of your housing,
Yeah.
which
Unless
is,
they're a college
Wow.
student.
Yeah.
Unless they're a college student.
They're no longer your dependent. What was I gonna say? It's,
So it forces you to kick your kid out.
it in some ways incentivizes
Oh,
people to stay at
forces
low
you-
income.
Forces you to want.
That's, you hit it exactly, Molly.
But again, it's like, what are you the question you're gonna have to wrestle with is, what are you trying to
I
accomplish?
still think it's a great idea. I just see that that's
Yep.
a point of
there are,
conflict.
That's a
there are
huge-
downsides, but I mean, overall, I think it's a.
What was the
I mean,
point you were-
I agree.
That sometimes when people are become over income, It's not like they're suddenly able to afford a market
Oh,
rate.
yes,
So how do we,
yes,
how do
yeah.
we bridge the gap? So for example, on Medicaid, you pay almost nothing
Right.
for your medical care, and then as soon as you earn, $500 over the income limit, then suddenly your medical costs go up
$2,000.
$2,000, and that, you're in the hole for $1,500.
And it
So how do you,
decentivizes people.
exactly, so
Exactly.
how do you bridge that? And I realize that that's only in the case of
This isn't gonna
rental.
be able to address that
Okay.
challenge.
That's
I
fine.
understand what you're saying, I
Yeah.
see it all the time. But
Talk to your senator.
there's gotta be some standard to say this is an affordable unit, this is not. I mean, at some point, you have to be able to say it is or it isn't. And so, you hope that if people's income goes up,
I mean, I want to be clear, I still am in favor of this kind of ordinance.
okay.
Very much so. Especially because I do see that it would probably help local business owners in what they can afford to pay people,
Right.
matching what they can actually pay for housing.
Are you still involved with the state with affordable and workforce housing? You-
The only thing we are doing for the state of New Hampshire is writing that guidebook
79E,
on
that is.
79E.
Okay, I'm still in favor if we could ever change the landlord-tenant laws. That opens up about 200 units in Plymouth, because the landlords would say, okay, it's now worth risk to rent to someone on the bubble, rather than that person on the bubble going for government housing.
I would just say, regardless of what any of us may feel about that, I'm not certain that we can even
Oh, the town can't, but if she's got the ear of the state.
I don't, Mike. I'm working on a guidebook on 79E. That's what we're doing for them. They're not my client otherwise. I don't have that kind of clout here.
Well,
Sorry, but I
I
don't.
think you do. I think you sell yourself short.
Thinking you do.
No, I don't. I mean, I'm sorry. People say this in Massachusetts too, like it's somehow, no, I'm not. I'm not.
We
So,
have a lot of respect here in Plymouth,
So
so.
Judy, for Christmas, I would,
I like working.
I'm just joking.
So, think about this and maybe, shoot some comments to Joseph.
Yeah.
You can
Can we
shoot-
just do the density bonus without the income?
Well, that's a policy choice for you guys. This is about creating affordable housing.
Yeah.
That's what this is about. So if you don't want to do this, then that's, the board needs to
Yeah,
tell me
what's-
is, we don't want to do this.
What's the point of doing a density bonus without income?
It-
Unless, why not just do a density bonus, like increase density everywhere?
Well, we're already doing the OSRD.
And we've done that.
Right.
Which allows
Yeah.
you, even with just a few units,
Yeah.
to get a density bonus. You don't have to build out 100 houses to get a
Right.
density bonus.
Yeah, you don't.
And so within the OSRD, you can already find lots of ways to get a density bonus. And I think that's a great first start in that regard. This is, I see as something very different.
Yeah.
And I think they're both useful strategies, and I think we've already made a good start with one of them.
I think the difference between housing that's developed under an ordinance like this and sort of, quote, I hate euphemisms, but naturally occurring affordable housing, the small unit, is that the small unit value rides with the market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if the market is really robust, then that unit's gonna be worth some amount of money
Yeah.
regardless. If people want it, they're gonna buy it. Just talk to people in Nantucket who've seen Copley come in and buy their homes and multifamily units and make them SDRs. So, don't assume that a small unit means that it's gonna stay affordable.
Yeah.
But what this does is say, and so once you've created that affordable unit and the developer's gotten the benefit of the extra market units, that unit's gonna stay affordable regardless of what happens with the market. That's the point of doing it, and you have to decide as a board, do we want to do that or not? But it was like this piece that was, part of the recommendations we made, and I wanna make sure I don't not do this. And all you have to tell me is yes, no, or change it. It's,
Yeah?
I don't know enough about it. I'd love to talk to a couple communities. How does this differ from rent control, like in New York City, that got a real black eye from, no one wanted anything to do with it, with the rent controlled.
Who didn't want
Different
it?
I
in
was gonna
several,
say-
it's different in
I-
several
I-
ways.
a lot of people
Tenants
did.
love it. What
Yeah.
are you talking
Oh, I'm
about?
sure the tenants, but and I don't know what it
Landlords
was.
like it, sure.
And I don't know why it
rent
got such a.
control is a different thing. Rent
Right.
control is, there's an existing inventory of rental housing, and we're gonna cap what you can rent for it.
Or
opposed to-
limit how much you can go up.
Exactly.
When it changes
And I think-
hands.
Which is
But this is a
happening right now.
development tool.
Right.
It's not, rent control is controversial because you could not build another unit, and rent control applies to the existing inventory. So people who bought with the, market-backed expectation of being able to make a certain amount of money because rents would go up a certain level, suddenly find themselves with that, investment-backed expectation trashed. That's not what this is. You go into this as a developer knowing
Yeah.
that you are creating a unit that's going to have a deed restriction with it. So it's not like rent control
And
at all.
honestly, Mike, once you build it, and I mean, once it's out of your hands, it's out of your hair. Like, the deed restriction is the responsibility of the owner and the future buyer, and like,
Right.
that's not, there's nothing for the town to worry about. It's maybe New Hampshire Housing will enforce that, but like,
And if you don't want to do it,
They sometimes
do it.
get involved with
Yeah.
the rental monitoring.
yeah. I mean, think about your kids buying a house. Like, you've got kids with, beginning wages and they want to buy a house. Like, there's something out here that says, hey, if you qualify for this income, you can buy this affordable house, which is deed restricted, and it's a place for them to live and save money instead of paying rent in an apartment.
You would
They're
give-
still building equity. It's just on a different scale than market
Right,
rate
it's
equity that might
proportional.
inflate.
Do they need to know, is there I know nothing about this.
So
Is there like
Qualified-
grandparents bring in a $10,000 down payment? Is that allowed type of thing?
So for homeownership, the bank will require a percentage of the down payment to be from the buyer's own savings. Some of it can be, it depends on the lender, but typically, at least half of the down payment has to come from the buyer's own savings.
can you get like an
Resources.
FHA loan or something where you have lower down payment requirements on a subsidized?
Yeah, it depends on the bank. I mean, some
There are
banks,
market rate loans that go down to as low as 3% down payment.
that's correct.
You just
And
have to
there-
pay PMI.
There are also bank, first-time home buyer products that hold back a percentage of the sale price, if you will,
Right.
to assure that deeper affordability. So the bank holds that, the bank's gonna finance 95% of the purchase, right? But some percentage of it is in a second mortgage that just sits there as a deferred payment loan. So the amount the buyer has to pay is reduced. It's sort of a soft second loan type of product.
You can still
This-
use all of those tools if you're getting one of these.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. So there's a variety of ways to make it work, and some banks know this stuff better than others, but anyway,
It doesn't bother me. I like the concept, honestly. It's, we're not gonna see acres, or we're not gonna see hundreds of these houses that are defined as, but, if you see a new development with 20 houses and 5 of them go in as affordable in perpetuity, like, that's not a bad thing for town.
And on the more cynical side of
'Cause
things,
chances are those 5 are gonna be sold once and they're never gonna change. Sorry, thank you.
I was gonna say, on the more cynical side of things, I would love for this to be passed and get used. There are towns out there that simply pass these things with the intent of never using them
that's right.
because they want to be on the right side of like,
History.
no, not even on the right side of history. They want to be on the right side of workforce housing laws and all sorts of other things, and it protects their butts if they ever get like into a jam. And I would love to see it actually getting used. But even if they don't get used, there are other benefits that towns sometimes like to play off of.
So if I were to choose, I would want the type of housing where they can own and not be limited on working extra hours versus an apartment where they're forced to move out if their income goes up. And I'm agreeing 100% with Molly's statement. So I'd rather go ownership-wise rather than rental-wise with that type of program. I don't know what others think.
So the problem with that is you can't, through zoning, control form of ownership. I mean, you just can't do that,
If
so.
the developer wants to build apartments, we get
Yeah,
apartments.
I mean, the fact is, you know this as well as anybody around this table, what you allow right now for multifamily housing is not going to lead a private motivated developer to develop rental housing in this town. The land is too expensive, they're not gonna get enough return on it, so you're really looking at an ownership product anyway. Now, if you really want to sort of steer this toward home ownership, you can limit the inclusion unit to single-family, detached or attached.
Yeah, isn't that part of the problem with even these limits right now? Because if this information is correct, roughly median household income is $80,000 in
I
Grafton
don't have those
County.
income limits right
And
now.
then, so the low income, you can't, so $40,000, you can't build a house.
Right.
No one's gonna build that house.
Right.
And then even if you go to the low and moderate, I mean, it would be really hard to build a unit.
Well, they're getting help at that point, aren't they?
Moderate,
There's grants that they'll be getting.
typically not for the home buyers.
80, in 2022, according to this.
There's no subsidy for home buyer purchases that I am aware of. in
Home
the state of-
builders is what I was saying, the builders.
The subsidy is this. They're not getting financing, special financing from anybody. The state home program doesn't do that. They do it for rental, but not ownership.
The builders is what I'm saying.
They don't, that's right.
So
This
there's some
has to
tax
make it
credits.
work. There's no subsidy for ownership. So what I'm
Okay.
saying is, if you really want to drive this toward homeowner, regulate the type of dwelling unit that can be eligible for the density bonus. I'm not trying to steer this. I'm just telling you, if that's what you want, there's a way to probably make that happen.
I'd be up for that.
But, but then another need doesn't get addressed. And so this is a policy decision you guys
I mean,
have to
it
make.
seems in many ways, I mean, as you were kind of pointing to, that the market in Plymouth, the way is right now, and with our current zoning, even if this passed, is not necessarily very friendly to building a lot of rental units.
God, no.
And this is really, I mean, it's throwing a bone at like the possibility of building rental units, but it's probably not gonna happen at any large scale with what we have right now.
Not for this.
Or not for just about anything almost, but,
There's not enough in this to
Yeah.
make a rental project work, so. But I'm just saying, if again, it's policy. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm just saying, if you want to focus on promoting an inventory of affordable homeownership units, then regulate the type of dwelling unit for which a density bonus will be granted. Do I think it's a good idea? No, but it's up to you. I'm just trying to give you information so you can make a decision.
I appreciate it. I like that idea. I hate people being limited in how much they can make, and they don't strive to get a promotion or to work more hours, told they can't get extra overtime because they're gonna lose their apartment or their home.
or they simply can't afford to live anywhere because.
Or their son ages out and then he starts to,
So, but Mike, at what point do you say there has to be some regulation of it? I mean, do you just say none? People can get an affordable unit but not have to meet any income qualifications?
no, I'm saying it's fine for the single-family homes.
He wants to regulate it. We want these
I'm
for
talking about
single-family homes.
specifically for
and not
rental, because I know
rentals.
you're concerned about it.
I am very concerned.
Okay, so,
I
but-
spent a lot of time in Franklin.
So let me just, I don't want to hear about Franklin anymore. I'm talking about your town. If you,
If you
If
spent some
someone-
time in Franklin, you would know.
I care about this town.
I do
I
too.
know about Franklin.
And
So-
I don't want this town to turn to Franklin,
Okay.
believe me.
I'm trying to ask you a question.
Sure, go ahead.
What is wrong with someone's economic position improving enough that they are no longer eligible for an affordable unit, that they have to go out to the market and find another place to live? What's wrong with that? If they can make more money, God love them, let them go make more money and let them find a unit in the market that they can afford.
So, as it was,
We don't know that everyone will be incentivized to stay at an income bracket.
I rent apartments, I have 15 rental units on my farm, I see it all the time, and they,
But you're not-
they
you don't
get,
rent
they go
subsidized
for an
units.
increase and they get an extra $800 a month in income?
But you're not renting subsidized units.
No, I'm not.
So how do you know
But
this?
I mean, actually, some of them probably are, I don't wanna, but they get an $800 increase in pay, and then they lose out on their apartment, now they've gotta pay an extra $1,500 for a market.
So is there a
Based
need at the
unit.
100% median income for rental units?
Is there what?
Is there a need in the market, the rental market in this town, for units that are affordable at, say, 80 to 100% of median, which is above those income limits you're talking about? Are you saying that you need almost something to graduate to before you hit the market?
I don't know what the answer is.
Okay, but these are things you need to think about.
I
I
have
think
a
about it
bigger-
all the time.
I have a bigger picture, thing here. One of the things we talk about in New Hampshire and in Plymouth in particular with the university here is that we're all getting older. I mean, this
Don't talk to
state
me.
is like aging out.
Don't
And
talk to me.
In this town, you've got like thousands of young
Beats-
people
beats the alternative.
constantly coming through, and
Voting.
a few of them stay. But we could lure more of them to stay, but with a starting salary for many of these people, they can't. And if we had more opportunities for people to live with those starting salaries, you'd have employers saying, hey, look, I have people living here who can actually like afford to work my job and live here. And you'd have students who might actually say, hey, I'm gonna stay here because I can actually afford to live here. And I mean, I'm overblowing what this is actually gonna do, like in any immediate like moment. But I think we want to have more affordable housing, however we define that technically or just broadly in terms of how we use that word. If we actually want to not just have people retiring here and like aging out our entire state.
So theoretically, John,
Yeah.
that sounds awesome. It sounds great. Most people would not see any flaws in that thinking. But there are affordable housing that are income-based, that people are living in these units, and the check that they're getting per month that's sent to them, whether they leave their house or not, is just enough for them to stay in that unit. They work more than 20 hours a week, they're over that limit. And in some cases, there are people living in income-based housing that aren't working at all. They're not going off to a job. They have to keep it down. So there's no incentive for them to go and work.
I get that, and I
Well,
would
Mike,
say
you're-
call your senator.
I was gonna say, your concern is about the social support systems that are out there, not housing prices, right?
I've had a tenant in Claremont, and
How many rental units do you own?
I don't have those anymore.
Okay.
It's in the family, I managed them, and thank God,
You don't being a jerk, right?
thank God. It was pretty scary in that town. But anyway, I could talk for a couple hours about Claremont. And I can say it because I grew up in Claremont. But I had a tenant, single mom, had a job, loved her job. And I said, you're behind on rent. I'm new sheriff in town. I'm taking over collecting the rent here, and in a nice way. And she went to the town of Claremont to get aid to help pay back the rent. And they said, we can't help you. If you quit your job, we'll be able to help you. And that was the only way. She ended up moving out. I don't know where she moved to, but she couldn't afford to pay the rent anymore. She could afford to stay there and not pay, but she was told to leave her job in order to get enough help to pay the rent.
And that's a policy issue outside of land use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly, but I just want to know, we may not be dealing with it, but the people that are going to move to Plymouth for these income-based properties with kids are coming in. Most of the property tax that everybody talks about in Plymouth is the school tax. And we also, on top of that, have a problem of not having enough employees to fill jobs.
So reduce,
Wait, should we like throw Habitat out of town because we don't like the fact that they're building?
so just develop more of your conditional
restricted
use land
units?
and get the taxes off that land that it should be paying. I mean, you know,
I mean, do you not like the fact that Habitat's in town building deed restricted units?
Say that again?
We have Habitat building deed restricted units in town. I mean, they're not rental units, granted.
their ownership, yeah.
Their ownership.
I don't think we should single out one entity. in
No.
this.
Well, I know, I'm just saying, like, it's the one I can think of that's actually, I guess it's not a rental.
No,
We're
there
talking-
aren't that many other examples of new homes being built with deed restrictions.
Yeah.
I don't mind houses where people are not in the habit of being told they can't work extra hours or progress in their company because they could get kicked out. That's why I like
it's the rental.
ownership of houses.
So and the only thing I can say to you is, you can't regulate whether it's ownership or rental in zoning, but what you
But we
can
can
do is tilt the subsidy in a way that, and through also the regulation of the unit type, that the probability is it becomes a homeownership unit. And I'm
Like, I
not
think the-
advocating for that, I'm just saying that that is a choice you can make.
The other thing that, you seem to be focusing on the fact that, social support programs have a hard cutoff And once you
They
reach
hold
that-
people back. That's my
once you reach
problem.
that- So, I mean,
Not
but one
necessarily.
solution would be have a gradational scale of aid between, you know, if your income is this, you get more aid, if you, as you make more income, you get reduced aid until you're off of it, right? Like, you could have, so, I mean, it sounds like your concern is more about, you know, people not wanting to take on more work or do more, contribute more to the society
And
because of fear of losing of benefits, right?
And we really, I don't want to get too far
I
into
know,
larger
I know.
policy
This is
issues.
not-
I will say, I mean, some of these examples are kind of anecdotal. There are a lot of people who also work their way through this and get off
Oh, yeah.
the
Oh, yeah.
system
Yeah.
because they don't want to be restricted in this way in their lives long term. And it's the hoops that the government puts you through to do this stuff is kind of a pain in the butt, and they don't want to do that the rest of their lives. There are cases where out of desperation, or in some cases maybe personal laziness, someone will slide into that. But you can cite just as many examples, and probably a whole lot more, of people who don't want to be stuck doing this the rest of their lives,
And-
dealing with those state agencies.
And I agree 100%. No one wants to be in that situation where they're limited. I have phone calls all the time. All my apartments are income-based. I have people calling and say, I'll give you the first month. I give it the first month in security deposit. I'll bring it down today. And great, but they don't want to be in market-based. They want to be, but a lot of tenants, I mean, a lot of landlords are looking at their credit score, they're looking at 5 years of where they've last lived. And if they don't have all those things and they're maybe on the bubble, a landlord's no longer going to take a
What's
risk.
the bubble mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Do I take them or not? It's a hard choice. If they're on the bubble, landlords with the landlord-tenant laws are going to say no. So then they're forced. They don't want to, but they're forced to go look at income-based housing, which is the majority, which is.
I have never heard this. I'm sorry, Mike.
I deal with it. Every time
So-
I have an apartment, I'll get 60 calls.
I love to spar with you, but this doesn't make any sense
So
to me.
what I'm thinking right now is, we've got a really nice piece
I agree.
of an amendment here to look at, and most of us haven't even read it yet. And I really appreciate the work and the description you gave, which is very detailed and helpful. And we've got several months before we need to decide if we want to put this through this year or not. And we're going to be having some amendment discussions going forward. And I think this is a really good first discussion. And I think at this point, we're getting a little bit too far into kind of broader national and state policy issues and not land use. And I would love to continue the land use part of this discussion as we start to talk about zoning amendments in the fall and see what goes forward and decide as a board what we want to put forward. Does that sound like a good plan? But we still have to talk about the Tenny Mountain area as well this evening. And
Yeah.
everyone kind of consensually.
One quick question. What are the
Are you-
higher rates you've seen in bonus units in towns?
The higher rates of what?
Like the higher percentages? So you got here 20, 25.
The
Are there
density bonus, you
Yeah,
mean
the
the
density. Are there towns that do higher bonuses?
Yeah, I mean,
1 and 3.
I think a developer will tell you one affordable to 3 market.
It's pretty standard.
Yeah, it really is. And I didn't go that far, but I mean, that would be my recommendation. But I never know when I come here if somebody's gonna yell at me for
Because-
about affordable housing, so I thought, I'm like trying to be,
We might yell with you.
but 1 to 3 is typical.
That 1 to 3 ratio is because the market rate
Takes that
is
much to
able to
subsidize.
subsidize, okay,
Right.
Yeah.
yeah.
So I just did a little math while we were chatting, and based on the area median income that Mark shared, and current mortgage rates, you would be able to buy the definition of affordable in this market is $185,000 purchase price.
Yeah.
And
I-
there's
we-
very little in the market
We had
for that.
calculated that for the needs assessment, but I didn't have that number off the top of
Yeah.
my head.
And that is all in our reports, all that
Yeah,
sort
it
of
is,
stuff.
yeah.
Just wait till the 40-year mortgage becomes popular.
What's that?
Wait till the 40-year mortgage becomes popular.
Well, this is defined, the affordability is defined by 30-year mortgage.
30-year, I read that.
30-year fixed rate,
That's right,
so,
5% down,
yeah.
We'll start
interest
seeing
rate
40s.
tied to Freddie Mac's weekly mortgage market
Yeah.
survey.
Have to.
And so the loans get bought out, so they don't stay local then.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
That's up to the bank.
Almost all secondary
Yeah,
market. I mean, they get
Bring
sold
more
in the
buyers
secondary
in.
market, usually.
that's right.
Because Fannie Mae has
The
policies.
securitization of mortgages.
Yeah,
There were a few banks that kept them local for a while.
yeah.
But mostly they get sold. That bundle.
I don't
it
think any
sounded
more
like.
or less than any other mortgage product that I'm aware of.
We went out of our way to find a bank that kept our
Local,
mortgage
in
in-house,
portfolio?
and then the bank got bought.
Yeah,
It's pretty rare.
yeah. Most of these are not portfolio loans. Yeah.
Really guaranteed.
What's happening is, with this new high-speed internet that the co-op's putting in, a lot of these towns that are outliers around Plymouth are able to market land, and people are putting in mobile homes or, double wides or modulars. And they can come in at that price.
185.
Yeah. They can do it, but there's a huge amount of land being developed in some of these towns where it was impossible. You couldn't even get a cell phone to work before. Now you got high-speed internet because of,
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah.
uh,
Interesting, Neil.
All right.
You
So,
want to flip to
yeah,
Yep.
Tenny
I think
Mountain?
so. So, that's a little bit of background. So the Housing Committee met with Stephen Kelly and the Tenny Mountain team. I think there was one other individual there, I believe.
It was his project manager or
Yeah,
something.
and we talked about, well, they gave us a presentation on what they would like to do in the area and what their plans were, to the best that they could kind of muster together some kind of sense of a master plan, as things continue to evolve on their end. And we listened, we asked some questions, and it seemed that out of all of that, what seemed to be most amenable to people was some sort of framework that looks like a planned unit development. In other words, they come up with a master plan for the site that we would then have to approve as the kind of blueprint to go forward with planning, which gives them some more flexibility in terms of zoning regulations, but in return, we get to kind of oversee that flexibility. Am I describing this well?
Yeah.
And it seemed that that's the way we were going. However, I think you're working on this right now, and there usually are some guardrails in place and some kind of guidelines to let the developer know what we're kind of interested in and what our kind of limits might be, and to kind of move the process forward, and so they don't like propose something absolutely like out of our frame of reference. And so it would be helpful to hear from all of us, I think, tonight, how we feel about what we're comfortable with there, what we'd like to see there. So one way to go through this before we just kind of throw it open is to kind of, in a more deliberate way, kind of go through it like one by one, like go around the table and like talk a little bit about how we envision something there looking. And I know some of us have heard more about plans there than others. And so yeah, we all get to be heard before we kind of all jump in and start talking about this. Want to start on this side and kind of come this way, maybe? If you want to, I know you've joined the board more recently, and
What's that?
So we know we have this mountain there, and I know you're aware of this, and we've had some developers over the years trying to work there, and so the current owner and team of developers has said some things about what they would like to do, and not even getting too far into that at this point. It would be helpful to know what we would be comfortable with, or what we would love to see there, and in our dreams, like what would it look like, and before we kind of set to the like on paper the kind of guardrails for this project.
I like to see, serve the people, of the town, you know, whatever way that can be. I think what they're trying to do up there, to me, is a little bit more blown up than I think realistically can happen. That's the way I sort of see it. I know in what little bit I know, what I've seen of what they want to do. To me, it doesn't sound really realistic as far as really working, you know? You look at the winners and what's been going on, and can that really survive? And will that place just go up again, you know? So I sort of see it like that. I would love to see it there. It's been there forever.
But I guess if they could be successful somehow,
Yeah,
what would you be comfortable with?
as far as,
Like, is there something you really wouldn't want to see? Is there something you're comfortable with if they actually could muster the development together to
I
get
would-
this done?
I would definitely like to see it happen, you know? I think it would help, you know?
More hotels, more housing, recreational
I
facilities?
think the housing, I personally would think the housing would be more realistic, wouldn't it? Than it would be the motels, I would think. I think we got enough motels around. Maybe it would fit in there. You know, to be honest with you, I haven't really thought about it that way, but I would think whatever, I'd like to see what would happen, something to happen to, that would benefit this town and make it fit in right, you know? And to really say, oh, I think this should happen or that, I'd be lying, because I really haven't, to be honest with you, thought about it that much. But I've seen what they're doing up there, and I've seen some, like the condos they started putting up there, those up there, that nothing's happened with them, you know? And they just sat there, and will that happen again, or, I don't know. It's sort of, I'll be honest with you, I'm not really sure,
Okay.
you know?
That's fair enough.
But I think more people here have been around and seen more than probably know better than I would. But that's the way I'd see, you know. I would take, my opinion is whatever you people have seen, you probably know more than I do about it, and what you would think, since you've been on the planet more than I have. I'm just a newbie. You know, I would definitely agree with what, you know, that's, you know, what that would be. That's my feeling. I'm basically, what would benefit this town, and what would help, and the future of the younger children, and the younger generation coming in, I'm thinking about them, you know, and that's what I'm thinking about. And so whatever works for them, you know, and I'm all for that, so that's all I'm gonna say that note. Thanks for starting me out in the beginning, though.
Thanks for throwing you under the bus and making me go first.
Well, we could have started with Michael, but he might be
I
a
would have
little
liked to
too
heard
close.
Michael first.
With the planned unit development and them having to present a master plan to come forward, I'm thinking like down the road into their project, what does it look like, and how does it work if there are substantial changes, which, you know, on things where multi-phase projects,
Yeah.
like there always are. You know, say they present this master plan under the PUD guidelines, and then we'll just say 2 years in and 28% done according to the master plan. You know, something changes in their view or their business or their priorities. Like, hey, we're actually going to go this way with it. What does that look like? Are they sort of locked in where we're like, sorry, this is what you told us.
You
and
can
this
answer
is what
that.
you
I
gotta
just have one question, statement for everyone first.
do.
I think it's a great question, a really important question, and I don't want to get too deeply into the weeds right away, as opposed to just kind of talking more broadly about what
Well, I
we'd like
only
to see
asked
there.
that question because I don't have an answer
Yeah,
to.
I-
It
and I
is a
do,
great,
but
it's actually a fantastic question.
Yeah.
It's a really
We'll
good
get to it. It's a fair question,
All
but
right.
there is an answer.
Yep. All right. Well, to answer your question, I don't have an answer. That's why I asked that question.
That's okay.
So when we've discussed the Tenny Mountain overlay for this amount of time, I guess I've always thought of, you know, I'm reflecting off of what they've been discussing. I've never actually reflected what do I want there. So I can't answer that question right here on the spot because I really have never given that thought. What do I want to see there? I think as far as their development goes, I do hope that we can offer some flexibility to allow something to happen, but still be able to not oversee, that's not the right word, but still make sure it's doing right for that area and not so it's blown out of proportion where we look back 2 or 3 decades down the road, and we're like, oh my gosh, what a miss this was.
Well, this is what we do with zoning, right? We say we do want these types of buildings and not these types of buildings, for example, or these uses and not these uses. And this is a kind of very targeted, like, example of that. And this is our opportunity to put those guardrails on if there are things you really don't want to see.
Right, yeah. Maybe when it goes around,
We'll come back to you.
I think for me that I've seen all my life that place succeed and then come and go in and out. I don't have any expectations. I would like to see him do what he said he was going to do when he came in a couple of years ago, and that hasn't come to fruition, but I understand all the hurdles that he's had. So I guess I'm just sitting back and kind of watching what he's doing. What would I like to see in the future? I think it's a recreational area, and I think it's a good area. It's a large area to expand, but I really haven't put a lot of thought into it because I guess I've kind of shut down trying to see what he does with what he said he's going to do.
Can I ask what he said he was gonna do, since I wasn't there?
Oh,
Well-
there was a site plan. Rebuild the lodge.
There was a huge
the
lodge. There were
$35 million
Big tower
renovation.
with handicap access
Elevator.
to the road and with an elevator and then
A
keep
lot
going
of-
on the main level.
Well, there's also been a lot beyond that in
Yeah.
the, like,
Well, there was a lot of
Major discussion.
infrastructure. There was a lot more mountain space. There was going to be a lot more year-round recreational stuff. And these plans, this was going to get started and get going, which it was very enthusiastic, and it's great, and I would love to see all that happen. But I understand why he hasn't done all that stuff. It was aggressive, it was expensive,
Yeah.
and you really have to get the feel of the town before you jump in and do big things like that. He was trying to make a Boulder out of Plymouth, and, Boulder, Colorado, that was his vision.
Yeah,
It's
I
like,
definitely agree with you there.
you drive up and this is gonna be this shining light, and
Yeah.
kudos to him if he can do it. So I just really don't have any expectation at this point.
Boulder's not a ski town. Boulder's down on the flats.
I think she knows him.
Thinking Aspen or Vail, but yeah. But still, yeah.
Big area.
I know.
Do we want to talk about the presentation that he gave to the housing committee?
I missed
mean-
that.
Developer.
Or do you want?
I mean, we
Was that all-
could.
was that all
I purposely didn't say a whole lot about that. 'Cause I didn't want to say like, oh yeah, that thing, or no, not that thing.
I agree.
I kind of liked it a little bit open-ended first, and maybe we can kind of get back to that.
I mean, for it to be successful, I think it has to be just like other successful small ski mountains, and it's gonna have to be a mixture of ski in and ski out townhouses and single family homes, and it's gonna have to have a small hotel or something there. Like, to make it successful, to make it an attraction for people to actually stop there, instead of going to Loon or Cannon or wherever that aren't that much further, right? If you're already driving up from Boston, you can keep driving a little bit longer. It's never going to be the size of Loon, but I'm just saying it. Like, I think it has to have a mixture of housing, rental, permanent housing, for it to be successful. And I think the big question is, and I'm sure we'll get tons of feedback from the people that live up there. But, what are their hopes and dreams for that area? I mean, I think if I personally was an owner there, I'd want the tenning to be as successful as it possibly could. It's only going to help you in the long run when if your goal is to eventually sell your unit to someone else, right? You want the mountain to be up and running. You want there to be a successful restaurant. And so I think it has to look like other small ski areas where there's multiple options. And I think it was Sue that mentioned other recreational opportunities. I think that's going to be important too, right? Because a lot of these places are not just ski areas now. There's other things to keep people coming in the off season. So I guess that would be my hope.
Do you have thoughts you want to share?
Sure. I will say, when they did give a presentation, it was very ambitious. I think Matt and Sue were both alluding to that as well. And I wouldn't mind seeing a larger hotel. I wouldn't mind seeing some multi-unit buildings there. I wouldn't mind seeing more townhouses there, entertainment venues, four-season recreation, and all that sort of stuff. And I wouldn't mind that getting pretty big in terms of if he could actually pull it off, why not? And just like some other larger developments, where we see this same sort of thing. In terms of some of the other things they have talked about, to give you a little bit of a clue into that, like tech park sort of stuff. I'm not inherently opposed to that. My reticence comes in when I say that word, in my brain, I see things
Yeah,
that are hideous
yeah.
and I would never want to see in Plymouth. They don't have to be built that way.
Right.
A lot of them are handlers.
And this is where, for me, in certain ways, I'm less concerned with use and size than I am with some kind of design guidelines and maybe even design review, which a small town doesn't normally do. But for something like a PUD, maybe we could.
You could have a peer review architect.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, like I say, like, dream, go for it. As long as it's not an eyesore. And for me, that's less about size and more about good design.
Spoken like a planner.
I'm, what's that?
But you can regulate it sometimes.
Honestly, I think that when I think about the potential that location, the ski mountain, and potential future development there has for this town, I really think it's a diamond in the rough. I think it is a huge asset to this town that's untapped. I think there's a great potential to develop year-round recreation, housing. I think the investment in the facility will drive business development. When I think about other small towns like the town of Ludlow near Okemo, has a feel that I could see, Plymouth being very close to.
Is that in New Hampshire?
It's in Vermont. Henniker is, Pat's Peak is in Henniker. They do a fairly busy night skiing throughout the week, which I think before they closed, I think Tenny had lights. I think they all, that system came down, would need to be rebuilt, but I really do think I think we should be very flexible in encouraging a ready and willing investor to make it work. I think, it's gonna be in his best interest to make prudent financial investments, and it's also gonna benefit the town. I see very little downside to developing that area. It's an existing developed area. There's existing housing. There's potential to put more housing there. There's potential to put a hotel, ski in, ski out hotel. The Jackson Gore Resort, kind of at the north end of Okemo, is a really nice place that they built maybe 10 years ago, and the amount of, like, that's where people go. Like, if it's an amazing place, and mountain biking in the summer, hiking. There are parks that have alpine slides, that have like adventure parks in the summer. Like, there are all kinds of opportunities that continue to drive tourists year round. I don't think it's ever going to be a loon.
Well, can I say one thing after she's done?
Yeah. I don't think it'll ever be a loon, and I don't think it'll be a Waterville Valley. But I think that, when I think about places I want to go as a New Hampshire resident, like, I'm not so keen on Loon or Waterville. Like, I might go to Cannon, I might go to Ragged. Like, those are the places where, like, I feel like it's low key, and New Hampshire people, New Hampshire families go there. Like, that's the community I want to be at when I'm out for a day, and I think it has potential to do that. Like, yeah, I mean, if you put in a bunch of housing, we're gonna get out of state people. And potentially we're gonna get some kids if we put in there. But I have a feeling that these are gonna be above market rate builds, and I don't think it's the worst thing in the world for families with resources to come into the town.
I have to add, like, Waterville Valley, I mean, we have a real town here. They've
We
got
do.
their town square, which feels like a manufactured town.
Yeah,
And it is.
yeah.
And
I mean, it's, people are concerned about traffic on Tenny Mountain Highway now. It's gonna get worse.
Yeah.
If, you know, we know that. It'll be very busy in the morning, very busy in the afternoon. Businesses will thrive because everybody's gonna stop to get coffee, donuts, snacks on the way out. You know, maybe they stop at the last chair. Maybe there'll be other restaurants. I mean, there are a couple restaurants along 3A that have been torn down. Like, I moved into town in 2014 after it closed. I've never seen it operating at full tilt. And like, I can only imagine that, like, with some investment, it's going to only benefit the town. I would support.
you want to come back to you before we
Yeah, I just
move
want
on?
to say, well, I totally agree with you there. I think being a skier, which I haven't done in a while, and I'd love to do it and stuff,
Yeah.
I would love to see that place stay a ski area. I think it's a nice, comfortable family place, you know, instead of going to Waterville or going to these places that are totally expensive, you know. I think it'd be great to say that.
It's gonna be expensive too.
No, I know it is. I know. I
But it's gonna
realize
be
it
our
is.
expenses.
But you know what I'm saying? I totally agree with you there as far as, I think it would benefit this town. And I'd love to stay and see it stay that way, a ski area or a recreation place. And more than I would housing, but if they could maybe put some housing in there, or whatever, helped, you know.
It usually goes together.
Exactly.
You gotta have some housing to support the need
Yeah.
for recreation trails. You got, you know,
I'm totally
if
for
you don't
that.
have enough people using recreation trails, they fall apart. They don't get maintained. You have to have enough use there.
I have to give one credit for this man over here, though, because if it hadn't been for him, it would have been, that place
Absolutely.
would have been gone by now.
Yes.
You're the only one, Mike, as far as I can concerned,
You've been
who
keeping
saved
it
it from
rolling.
happening. And I'll tell you that, I feel totally that way.
Pay him to say that. Thank you, Brad.
Okay, I second a lot of what was previously said. I would love to see year-round use of the place. I think there's a lot of possibility for recreation of various types, even expanding the skiing to maybe potentially be cross-country skiing. I'm not really sure what the site actually has. Maybe not. I'm comfortable with a hotel. I'm comfortable with a variety of housing units as well. Also want to know what people who already live there want to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, big time. And also very interested in design review. I'm done.
I grew up on that mountain. I spent most of my life up there growing up. I helped build all the infrastructure up there. I worked for Sam Hall. I worked for Basili. Basili had a good plan. Sam Hall he had a great operation, but he made a huge mistake. He didn't put snowmaking in when he should have. And then Basili got caught in the, let's say he got his toes out over the end of the surfboard. And then we had a recession. But running a ski area is kind of like surfing. If you got to catch a good wave, and you got to ride it, and if you don't, you're going to get lost in the backwash. And you got to, first of all, the mountain is excellent. It has excellent exposure. It has good terrain. It has a lot of potential. It holds snow really well, remarkably. It's all privately owned land. There's no U.S. Forest Service to tangle with, like Loon and Waterville. They got the cart before the horse. They need to have top-notch snowmaking, and they've got to have good lifts. They don't have a high-speed lift. They need a high-speed lift. That's where they should put their money right now, snowmaking and lifts. And the variety of the terrain is excellent. You know, you've got novice all the way up to, double black diamonds. The mountain should be developed in phases. You've already got everything you need to get the first phase going. They've got to have slope side units, condos and houses. That's what's going to make it go. And if they can then expand, and as that succeeds, they can maybe build a better lodge, and they've got to fix the roads. They, you know, they can't do them all at once. They've got to do, you know, segments. And, you know, at main access road first. I guess it's got to have on-site management. People, somebody who is a real snowmaker, a guy that understands snowmaking and lifts. You got to have those people there all the time. And then the other things will follow, like the ski school and the lodge. But I'm telling you, I worked at Waterville for many years, and I worked at Loon for years. And I had opportunities to work at other ski areas. But I was technical director at Tenney at one time. And, I love that mountain. And I feel that eventually they could have a golf course at the bottom of the mountain. And they could have mountain bikes in the summer. I know a little defunct mountain down in, it's in between Tilton and...
Hampton? Or
No, down past Tilton. There was a little mountain right...
Northfield?
Northfield,
Highland
Northfield.
Mountain Bike Park?
Yeah, that little ski area went belly up. And this guy bought it and started mountain bike.
How far do people come from to ride there?
From
Canada, they go everywhere.
All over
Yeah,
New England?
the thing
That place is
went
packed
like a
all the time.
rocket. And, I think that there's a lot of potential there. And I think that, we could, do a lot of, eventually, there's enough land privately owned so that it could be like Sunday River. And Sunday River is very successful.
Right.
But you have to grow. You can't do it all in one big jump.
Mhm.
That's my feeling.
Thank you, Neil.
Neil had some great, I've heard bits and parts that equal what Neil said. Incredible, Neil. When that mountain first was going and it was going, there were second homes in those condos. And when the mountain fell apart, they became single-family homes where we schooled their kids. To make housing affordable in Plymouth, we need to lower the taxes. And if we have second homes on Tenny Mountain, we will have income and we won't have to school the kids. And that's the secret. And you're right, the home sales can make the parks, can make the recreation all possible in that mountain. And I'm not sure if Steve's going in that direction. He keeps thinking about just housing. And there's a way to make money in housing, obviously. But the mountain, people know about Tenny from Rhode Island, Connecticut. They all remember Tenny. And I've never heard one negative word about the terrain or anything about Tenny. It's got it. It needs the snowmaking. If we can ever do that again and get second homes, he's got all the tools with the zoning we have in Plymouth to make that mountain successful. Whether it's going to be a Les Otten or it's going to be someone that's doing it like Steve Kelly, if you go the wrong route, you can make it hard for someone like Les Otten to want to come in and develop it as a recreation area. So I'm a little nervous about that. Could be a downside if it's not done right. Plymouth has such a huge opportunity with that mountain. And this planning board has a very important role. And we could go the wrong way or we could go the right way. But I loved all the other ideas. But I'm just saying property taxes can help out the rest of the community if we do it right at Tenny.
Mike, this should be good.
You want to say
I
anything?
can't wait to listen to this. This should be great.
Yes, for
I've been
laughs.
waiting for this minute.
What do you envision?
I can just see it. Boy, I wish I had a tape recorder. Oh.
Most of what I know about the mountain came from you, Michael.
Obviously, I'm a huge supporter. Love the mountain and so on. But obviously, back in 2012 when we came in here, first thing I did is came to the planning board and the town to get some feedback. And they had another consultant at the time. And what the challenges would be moving forward. And obviously, you have to put a plan together and do your fact checking. So as you know, we did put a master plan together that was spread over 12 years, and Steve Kelly come in here, it was actually phase 3, get the mountain operational and so on. But let me just back up a little bit. There's a lot of challenges that we have. We don't want to end up with a huge white elephant like some other mountains, right? Put a ton of money into them and then they collapse and then you can't do anything with it. You put $18 million in lifts, you put $5 million in snowmaking and so on. So from the fact checking and the backgrounds that we did, and I know Steve Kelly's doing this, if he's watching. He's doing fact checking. He's bringing in the consultants, not just one, but, 2, 3 of them and so on. And one of the things that we do know is it would be great, Neil, to have, like a Sunday River of a loom, but it's just not gonna be realistic because the mountain, although it has great terrain and so on, and obviously it faces a great direction, so it holds snow, the trails are narrow and so on. The challenges we have is global issues with weather as we move forward. We had Plymouth State University come in and do its study. We had Carnegie Mellon offset that study to kind of get an idea of what's going on. And the challenges of putting the money in to make snowmaking and so on, you're still going to have a short season, unfortunately. So the best thing that we could hope for is that the mountain is treated as an amenity. We do focus on housing. We do focus on recreation. We do put a heavy emphasis into mountain biking. I know Steve is doing all that. But in addition to that, I don't want to rule out, multi-dwelling units, high-density units as well. I was really pushing that, only because of the existing infrastructure. If you remember, we go back to 1988 and 89, the original master plan was for 2,200 units up there, right? That's what the infrastructure is designed for, massive, massive. And when you bought a unit up there, you actually pay a little bit extra, you got to slip a Newfound Lake. There was a marina that went along with it. I mean, it was a great vision that this mountain had. Unfortunately, they only got to the 170 units that are up there now, and they have a massive infrastructure that those units are trying to support. That's aging really quick. And the only way to make it affordable is to be able to put multi-dwelling units in there. Of course, a percentage, whatever that number is that Steve and the consultants are working on, 30, 40%. Second-tier houses that are high-end houses, and obviously some affordable housing as well. But one thing that is needed, and we all know, is the master plan, and I know that's being worked on. But in addition, is to not so much the recreational portion as the flagship. The only direction that I would add is to really put an emphasis on incubation and take advantage of the opportunity zone and the property that's there to look for local businesses and move them up into the area. And get that development going in addition to housing, because the property can support it. So that's, the only thing I would just add is probably, like I said, small business incubation in addition to the additional recreation and everything else that's going on. Supportive 1 or 2 hotels, definitely needed, because you have these weekend warriors that come up. Airbnb isn't for everybody and so on. But I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Need the hotel and the temporary dwelling unit zoning.
So, Judy,
I mean,
for us going forward and
yeah,
writing
so
something.
for the PD bylaw to be useful, there has to be some parameters in it. So if you're gonna say, the developer's gonna wanna know what uses are allowed. So if you say, outdoor recreation facilities such as, and you provide some examples, commercial space, retail, restaurant, whatever the uses are that you wanna see, those have to be in the PD ordinance, so the developer has some sense of what you're willing to consider. But then, you also have to think about, it's a big property and it's a complicated property. And what you don't necessarily want, it would be nice if like the recreational uses would just take off on their own, but the capital isn't there to make that happen. So the capital comes from the other uses. At the same time, you don't want to end up with a situation where you've got 2,000 housing units up there and no recreational space. So the PD ordinance needs to put some constraints on the percentage of a particular use that can go forward before some other things go forward. Those are market-driven considerations, but it's all kind of around the math of how do you get something going that's gonna generate the capital you need for these bigger nut improvements. And then kind of force those to go forward before something else advances. So you can have that kind of content in your ordinance. And those are sort of policy things that you kind of have to work out. But, you know, the thing you want to be careful about, and I know what your concern is about housing, but you got to be careful as a governing entity that you don't set housing policy based on who's going to live in units. So I think you have to almost think about what the market is. It's a fair housing situation. So, you know, how do you end up essentially encouraging a product that probably isn't going to be family housing? And there's an easy answer to that. But that's kind of what you have to think about, so that what you end up with is a product you're promoting that almost by design becomes seasonal or vacation, or dare I say, short-term rental. You know, Copley and organizations like that are dying to buy units that they can STR. But they're not going to do that unless the amenities are there or a plan for the amenities to support it. So I think the ordinance needs to say, kind of, these are the uses that will allow, these are the constraints under which any one of those uses can go forward, you know, at certain intervals. And what the infrastructure expectations are going to be of the town. And that's kind of one of my concerns for anybody up there is the infrastructure, the water, the sewer, and so forth, is that in a condition to support the amount of development that I think they have in mind? It's just funny that we're in the middle of this. We're doing a study for another community that's trying to cultivate a outdoor recreational amenity. And they're going after an Economic Development Administration grant, an EDA grant, to pay for the infrastructure. So the hospitality and tourism use itself doesn't generate the jobs that EDA wants. So you have to make this argument that there are these other uses that are going to basically financially support the development of the project. So you've got to think about that too. It's like, what's the financial reality of someone trying to take this mountain and do with it what you want to have, which is ultimately, I think, a year-round recreational facility. What's it going to take in physical improvements to make that happen? And it's not going to happen just as a recreational use, because they're not going to get the financing they need. I'm just being honest with you. There are banks that do this, there are lenders that do this, there are private investors that do this, and they're not going to do it just on the basis of a year-round recreational facility alone. So you have to decide as a board, from a policy standpoint, how much do you want to allow kind of related uses to take place there in order to create the capital environment that you need to make those improvements that then allow the rest of the project to go forward. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's all around, like, where's the investment coming from? Because it's not coming out of somebody's individual checkbook. It's just not.
I do have a slightly different question, but it relates to the fact that you keep saying there and the property, which is a geographic question of how we define this overlay or whatever it might be. Is it the property?
Right.
Is this like an entity?
Yeah, I know.
Or is it a whole region?
Right.
And I don't know if we're going to decide that tonight, but it's definitely something worth considering soon. Like, where do we actually draw these boundaries?
Well, I'm for the purposes of my work on this, because I don't have any other direction, I've just been kind of going what guidance I can pull out of the master plan. I mean, you have a master plan.
Yes.
So I'm just looking to that for answers.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Did you say you're working on a grant to write on 79E?
We're writing a guidebook for 79E for New Hampshire housing.
Okay, is there anything like that so that's a community revitalization tax relief
credit, right.
for downtown areas. Is there anything like that? Like, could we use something like that here?
So there are a couple of added provisions that deal specifically with housing.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't work for this type of thing.
I'm wondering, like,
For tech, for recreation, no.
I feel strongly enough about this that, like, I actually wonder if you know, what it would take to get some tax incentives in place that would defer property tax on the value for some period of time, maybe 10 years.
Like a TIF or something?
There are tax incentives in place.
Yeah.
So
for
TIFs are
example.
different,
Yeah.
but, I mean, I don't,
There is not tied to housing, there's the Economic Revitalization Zone
Yeah.
program, which
Yeah.
is more, well, it's targeted largely towards underutilized industrial parks and other, that's
Yeah.
not to say it's only used for those, but,
Right.
it's really targeted at underutilized properties where there is some type of development that's expected to create jobs, and that's against
Sounds
business
like it to
profit
me.
tax.
Well, and that's the EDA connection too, is that, you know, you have to be able to make a case for job creation.
Yeah.
For EDA funding, and EDA is the only agency that provides funding at that scale. I mean, and when you're talking about major infrastructure improvements. But if you compare something like that with your tax incentive legislation, existing legislation in New Hampshire, you might actually be able to make the thing viable.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
So,
But the long and short of that for this discussion is that we probably need to allow more than just recreational and residential uses.
well, if you want it to work,
Yeah.
somebody's gotta come up with the capital. It's not, someone's not gonna write out a check from their checkbook for the millions of dollars it's gonna take to prepare the infrastructure on that mountain for what you want. And,
We do have we are in an opportunity zone.
but that's not gonna do it. That doesn't even come close. No, I mean, opportunity zone's nice, but it's not gonna solve this problem.
Is that like
They
the,
need capital to do the project, and we're dealing with this in another place, so I'm just gonna leave it at that.
is
You
that
know,
like the EB5 program?
No,
Do you know about that?
we're working on an EDA application, so
JP?
I'm not sure.
it's a
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking about. Like in underdeveloped areas.
Yeah, I,
Basically, I don't know if you ever followed what JP did. They, yes.
someone in my office is doing that research as
Yeah.
we speak.
So they get a lot of foreign investment to
Right.
invest in an area.
But the return has to be there. You know, in order for
Oh.
you to get that investment, then the return has to be anticipated. So it all comes down to, what are you zoning for?
Right.
It costs too much money for the EB5 stuff. It's changed over the last 3 years. When you add it all up, all the payouts that you have to pay to do all the transfers and for all the visas and everything else, it's almost 18% on the dollar. It's just cheaper to
That's huge.
go and get regular investment.
Put it on a credit card for that much.
Yeah, it's crazy. It used to be cost effective, but when obviously that J-Peak and all the scandals started coming out,
Right.
it shot everything into
I
the
didn't hear
moon.
about that.
pretty much opportunity zone in the nutshell is take your money that could be taxed for capital gains, park it in a federally designated zip code
Yeah.
as an opportunity zone, keep it there, improve that by 2 different standards, and if you keep the money there for a long enough period of time,
Right.
you have an exemption to a degree from your capital gains for your money.
Well, EB5 though is about immigrants investing
Yeah, I
money.
Yeah, it's
And
completely
then you
different. It has nothing, it's,
At the Opportunity Zone, I created a fund called the Bouchard Opportunity Fund, and it will work. The problem I'm having with the large-scale investments, like the large-scale transfers that have high capital gains, like millions of dollars, we don't have an economic development
to do that with.
plan here in the town.
Right.
Because the first thing they asked me for, well, what's the culture, what is the economic plan, what's the culture, what's gonna happen in the next 30 years, and so on. So that's been my challenge. It's been easier to actually get money for non-opportunity zone areas by me being located here, like Bristol. They're getting tons of grants through this, but
Well, the thing you have to work with your regional planning agency on the comprehensive economic development strategy,
They
because
just
that's your vehicle.
adopted that last year.
I know.
Yeah.
That's your vehicle to EDA funding. EDA is the only agency that writes out checks at this scale. So, I'm just saying, you know, it's, in terms of the zoning, you just have to decide what uses are you willing to allow and under what circumstances. So, I'm gonna just touch housing because it's such a hot button in this town. If we said, you know, 20% of the gross floor area of all buildings on the property may be residential, put that kind of cap on, figure out what that translates into units. No more than X% of that can go forward until some other gross floor area of some other use on the property goes forward. And that's sort of the way you control it. And then you have to be a smart board and not tie the developer's hands so much that they can't do anything. But that's how it's done.
I just think it's such a beautiful resource for our community, that mountain. I would love to see the bike centers, all these other things that utilize the mountain and the beauty of it, rather than filling it with buildings and housing.
Yeah, I mean, and it would be lovely, and if they can figure out how to finance it, that's wonderful, but that's the challenge you've got, is what are the trade-offs you're
You know
willing to
that bike,
accept?
excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that bike mountain you were talking about, Neil, down south there by Tilton, that place is run on a low budget. I've been down there, I've hauled lumber down there, and they are making a killing down there. They've got, every time I've gone there, that place has been totally patched. And I know, I've watched them building it, it's almost like watching Terry up Brookside Lumber starting up. They started from nothing, and they're making a lot of money, and they're doing a really good job at it, you know, what they do, and I think, I could see that, something like that happening up at Tenny. I mean, if they can do it, well, I don't see why we can't do something like that, or why they couldn't do something like that.
And everything
I
that
don't
they
think
did there is probably, they have the tools in our zoning already to do it. The tools that we already have in our zoning could make that, duplicate it without having to change anything, without an overlay, with anything. They have the tools already, as far as I'm concerned.
It is also interesting to consider, and this is probably not for the board necessarily, but for like, maybe he even is already. There's a lot of really interesting recreation getting more and more intense in the area that can all piggyback on one another.
That's right.
Like, I think of
That's-
like Green Woodlands, for example, is getting huge at this point. You go to the parking lot there, it's just packed.
That's part of the argument we're making for this other community, is
Yeah.
this sort of
Can you
spill
explain,
out.
John? What's green, what did you?
Greenwoodland, it's a private
Yeah.
landowner owns several hundred, maybe a couple
Several.
thousand acres,
Huge.
like from
Thousands.
Dorchester over to Lyme. And it's private woodlot management, but every time so he started by converting skidder trails to cross-country ski trails. And now he's got, you know, basically built he hired the guys that built Highland to come out and like build mountain bike trails, and
Oh, that sounds awesome.
it is awesome.
Yeah, he's
And
done-
the thing is,
That's
it's-
what Plymouth
it's
needs.
free.
And it's free.
It's free.
It's
You
free.
can borrow skis like from a little
Like,
shed they
he
Oh my
actually
God.
Get
has
s'mores.
So,
Oh, that's awesome.
Here's the deal. What Plymouth needs still has to have financial reality.
Yes.
And
It
I-
does.
that's all I'm trying to say, is you've got awesome ideas, but it's gotta be feasible. And the question you gotta wrestle with is, what trade-offs are you willing to make it feasible to get what you want? I can't answer that question. You guys, it's in your hands.
Like, again, for me, I come back to like the kind of character issue. I don't mind a lot of these different uses, but I also know they can be atrocious
Yeah.
in practice,
Yep.
or they can be really wonderful. And I think this is where a PUD sort of development can be really helpful,
that's
is
right.
providing the oversight so we say, we actually we like these ideas, but like, no, it can't look like this, like,
Yeah.
please.
Well, you build value through
Yeah.
design review.
Is that, you know, are you talking about the type of development that would be in that tech sector that was mentioned before?
That, or even a large hotel. I mean, a lot of this sort of
Okay.
stuff, I mean, it could be really awesome and a benefit and make people say, oh, wow, Plymouth, that's that place with these like awesome buildings or whatever. Or
Yeah.
Plymouth, oh my God, like that place.
So basically, the zoning ordinance has to allow for, I'm just reflecting, make sure I understand. Allow for, or even specifically guide developers into the type of development that will start generating income more quickly
That's correct.
and at a scale
Because
that
they're
can
only
then
gonna,
fund the rest of the development.
because they're only gonna get so much debt.
Can I ask a question? Drilling, we're down at this detail level. I just wanna back out a little bit, because we're referring back to grants, the HUD grant or the housing grants. When the state puts these grants in place to get the federal funding, they already have criterias, right, that have to be met by the developer. Why do we go, and excuse me, I know we're doing a lot of work here, but why are we doing all this effort to put this huge extra overlay at this level when the grants already have the definition?
Grants are for affordable, the funding for New Hampshire housing is all about affordable housing. They're not funding market rate housing. They're not funding seasonal homes. They're not
Okay.
vacation homes. They don't fund any of that stuff.
That's good enough, I just
Yeah.
needed to hear.
But I mean, they're also economic development grants, right?
Oh, sure.
That would be more aligned with this type of project.
Right, but you have to make the case
Right.
for, the level of investment.
I would think
And-
it would be worth the town hiring someone to do the economic analysis, honestly. Like, if we have a developer that's willing to, I think it's worth paying the salary of somebody to build that case. I mean, if there are grants out there, like, I really think there's opportunity.
We're kind of on the borderline, but there's also like, there's the northern borders as well.
Yeah.
How does a zoning ordinance provide for the type of development that we need to see to make the project viable as a beginner?
So ideally, you want a type of zoning that allows for a master plan development. So the master plan is, you gotta submit a concept plan. We're gonna have skiing here, bikes here, whatever, trails, whatever, housings, tech, commercial.
Yep.
Pods,
Yep. Zones of
bubbles,
use.
if you will, the bubble diagrams. And so the board goes through a review process of whether that, and their developer has to provide some estimates of like how much development occurs in those different areas of the plan. And the board has to decide, does that plan satisfy the conditional use permit criteria that would be written in the ordinance?
Okay.
And you then provide for kind of master plan phasing, so that you don't end up with all of one use and not the rest of the benefits of the project. So that's kind of how it works.
And our zoning does not have anything
No,
like
you don't have that at all right now.
Didn't think
Not
so.
for this kind of project.
Okay, thank you.
Guess we need to talk some more, huh?
So we need to talk about uses, but also potentially building sizes and.
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't want somebody, building it could be gigantic, but it looks like crap. I mean, you don't want to have that happen. So it's like, what's the density, what's the size control? What are the design standards? I mean, all that, the beauty of a PUD ordinance is you can get into all that stuff.
Well, and for the record, so Stephen Kelly, when he came before the housing committee, talked about 4 or 5-story buildings, I believe.
Yeah, that's what he
or at least a
said.
couple of
3
them.
units per building.
He talked about, I believe they were a condo building with like 40 units, or were they rentals? I can't remember.
He was talking about a mix,
Yeah,
I mean,
a mix of all, like everything, basically, yeah.
he was looking at it from the perspective of capital, number one, it's just the capital the housing brings, but, vacation, rental housing, he needs housing for people who are gonna work there, he wants to be able to sell vacation homes. He
There's a higher
wants a
return,
mix.
and there's a higher return on investment for these larger buildings.
Oh, yeah,
So if you are trying to get the money together, there is a higher return on investment. And so I think, so part of our
Well, yeah, 'cause
question
you're
is, not only what are we allowed
getting more out of the
to,
land.
not only what are we allowing in terms of uses, but like if we want to allow those more kind of incubator tech
Yeah.
businesses or whatever, but also, are we okay with a 5-story building there? Are we okay with a 60-unit building there? Or all these sorts of questions?
Yeah, I mean, and is the answer the same in any location on the mountain?
Yeah, and that too. yeah.
Sometimes there's like view shed issues or things like that, that a PUD ordinance can regulate,
PUD stands for,
land unit development.
thank you.
Did we ever hear back from after that meeting?
No,
Not that I'm aware of.
no.
Joseph, do you have any communications from our requests?
No follow-up.
And this has to do with just the Tenny Mountain overlay, correct?
Yes.
So, Judy, you said that our zoning does not allow for him to come up with a plan.
That would be feasible to make the project work. You need a conditional use permit for a site master plan. So you can regulate phasing, you can regulate percentage of uses going forward, so you don't end up with more of one thing than perhaps another. You need a conditional use master plan for that. That's what those are for.
Do you think that other mountains had that?
Yeah,
They did. All of them?
I don't know, Mike. I just know of several that did. In New Hampshire, conditional use permit is the way this gets done.
I would
In other
be- I
states,
would
it's
be
a
fine
different
with that.
answer. Huh?
Yeah, I would be fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, it gives you control. It's like, don't you want control? It's a different tool in another state, but the principle's still the same. It's a discretionary approval process by the board, and you get to write the conditions into the permit that you need to write to protect the town, and at the same time, give the developer the ability to go forward with something that's gonna generate some income. It's all in the math. It's all in the math.
I think we need to be flexible enough to work with them to do that.
Yeah, I mean, make him prove it. So I just wanted some direction so I can sculpt something here, so I can get it to you, and then when I come back in September, you won't have a heart attack yet and over it, and but you'll have time to kind of chew on it, and I just can't.
Do we need a physical delineation of the area?
So it would help, and I don't really feel too prepared to kind of take that on. I was hoping that the developer would come back with that, but
I will throw out, I think whatever we do shouldn't be specific to that parcel, and I think we should include basically the whole area.
Valley.
Yeah, basically from the, is it Bridgewater Town Line?
Rotten is in back of him.
On which side?
No, from the.
Hebron.
The Hebron Town Line on
In
3A,
Groton.
all the way up to the traffic circle, 500 feet to the east, like, make that whole stretch of 3A all the way to the town line.
We had a tentative kind of bubble area on one of our maps. If some of our,
bubbles are great.
at one of our community meetings, or maybe
Yeah.
even more than one. And I don't think it was exactly like that, but it was not too far, I think.
I think a few
Um,
years ago when we talked about rezoning, we had talked
The
about
gateway zones.
the gateway zones,
Yeah.
which we would have been like, basically the highway commercial,
Yeah,
treating 3A and Route 3 like that,
yeah.
basically making it a mixed use. And I still think that that makes sense for that part of 3A.
Don't forget, you still gotta deal with the agricultural zone committee.
Bring them to meetings if they want to be here.
They
It's-
probably will show
That's
up.
fine, that's great.
We're expanding uses.
As long as they know they have the potential to make a boatload of money if they want. If they want.
They just want Plymouth to stay
It's not
quaint.
about the money for them.
It's not
They don't have
about
to
the
sell their
money.
land.
It's not about, they wanna hold on to their land.
They don't
want
have to sell
want
it.
Plymouth to stay quaint. They love the community.
Wait a second.
They don't have to change their land.
This is a separate issue that we'll get into like in a couple of weeks.
Wow.
But this notion that you want Plymouth to stay quaint and you will allow, for example, hotels, like anywhere in town, or
That's what your
storage
zoning
units,
says right now. I
storage
mean,
units anywhere in
zoning
town,
needs work.
or we can go on and on. I think I have a hard time swallowing that, but we'll talk about that maybe in a couple of weeks when we get to our.
Your zoning right now does not say quaint. I'm sorry. And the fact is that somebody who owns land does not have to sell it. If they want to keep their land quaint, they can keep their land quaint. If they want their neighbor to keep their land quaint, they can all get together and do a quaint,
Buy it.
LLC or something, but,
LLC.
I mean, it's just, you gotta decide what you want. I can write the zoning.
What do you want from us at this point?
I want to know that when I write something, based on the general stuff I've heard tonight, that when I come back here at the beginning of September, you're not going to bite my head off.
Well, so let's.
Oh, no.
Let's just kind of tick this off.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're all okay with recreational uses. We're kind of sort of okay with a mixed residential uses.
Sure.
It sounds like
Housing and
there
business.
might be limits on that, but we're kind of okay with mixed sorts of residential uses, I think. Are we okay with broader commercial uses?
Mm-hmm.
I think you
It's all
gotta-
stuff that's
Yeah.
allowed now.
Are we okay with like incubator tech sort of stuff?
It's allowed now.
Okay. Are we okay with, maybe in certain areas more than others, larger buildings that are taller?
Mike, you're correct that a lot of, not everything, but a lot of what we're talking about is allowed now. The difference is that when you have kind of a single site that you're trying to develop in an organized way, you want to be able to control how those uses manifest themselves. So it's not as simple as, well, you can have a retail store anywhere you want in the ag district. It's like, so where on that property are you going to accommodate commercial uses in exchange for something else? It's a planned development as
All right.
opposed to
I'm
a
gonna-
one-off.
I'm gonna pull my suggestion for the large area back then, based on that.
Yeah, because would be a little nervous if it's a quarter of Plymouth.
But I'm also concerned about the whole notion of spot zoning, creating a special zone just for one lot.
So the question is, what's the public benefit?
Right.
Don't talk to me about, I've
No, I,
dealt with spot zoning. I mean, you have to be able to show that there's a public benefit that outweighs, is equal, at least is equal to, is if not greater than
The
the
cost.
private benefit.
Okay.
So you do that through, anticipated quality of life, tax revenue, et cetera. I don't think you have a problem with spot zoning.
okay.
And presumably, if it does, extend beyond that one plot, I mean, anywhere where this overlay exists, somebody else could also do a separate
Yeah.
proposal.
Yeah, they could do whatever they wanted. They don't
And-
have to
and-
use the PD, that's
and-
the other
or-
point.
Or they could even do their separate planned unit development.
Yeah, there's no, PUD is like, it's this option. It's this conditional use option that sort of locks in the zoning pending a project that may take several years to build out.
You can do all the things you can do already in the ag zone. However, if you choose to use this particular tool, then you're also locked into that tool. And we can decide the uses within that tool, which might be slightly different than the uses in general in the ag zone. If you decide to use that tool, you can say, I don't want to use that tool, and then you just use the ag zone zoning.
Can I open up a real can of worms? 'Cause
Sure.
why
Let's
not,
hear it.
right? If the goal of the owners of land in the agricultural district want to keep Plymouth quaint, why can't we write purpose statements for each district that say things like quaint, agricultural, forestry? In which case, that would then force you to look at all the uses you allow right now in the ag district and say, is that really our vision of quaint? That's my challenge for you tonight,
Well,
my
my
friend.
challenge is to you, we've got a pretty sweet town right now.
You do.
And we have a lot of people with good intentions that move up here to Plymouth 5, 6, 7 years and think, oh, let's make some changes to the zoning. Next thing you know, we're starting to look like where they came from.
But Mike,
So-
actually, the changes that were made here pulled land rights back.
Right.
The changes that have been made in your zoning were not to like say anything goes, it was to say, in order to have a house, you're gonna have more land. So you actually took rights away in this town.
And I actually,
I mean, it's fascinating history here.
I actually have, I want to set us up for a next meeting at some point before we leave today. And I do want to talk about our zoning and our master plan and all of that sort of stuff. And I think it's 6 years into our master plan, it's worth like revisiting what we've accomplished and not, and what it looks like, and what we might want to look at going forward. And I just wanted to kind of introduce that today, have a bigger discussion about it next time. But I think some of these sorts of issues might come up.
Be a fun
I just want to make
conversation.
sure before we leave that we don't get too in the weeds about that, as important a conversation as it is, and we give you what you need.
I think I have enough to go by.
Okay.
I don't know that everybody's gonna be happy with what I write, but I mean, I think I have a sense
Yeah,
of what you
something to
want.
start with.
I have something to start with, I do.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Excellent.
I would propose that we skip next, first meeting of August and just do our third Thursday. Give
Why,
us a
because we
break.
want to talk about this?
Hmm?
Because we want to talk about this? Why do you propose skipping that meeting?
Because we're under no time constraint. It is summer and we've been overloaded with meetings.
We're gonna skip the meeting.
I know. July.
So we're gonna
That's
skip,
just a
so we're gonna
proposal.
skip all of our work sessions. This way we make sure we don't do any zoning amendments
No.
or anything.
I'm just saying August.
Was that
Like to have August off.
meeting you were
Trying to
gonna?
set me up for when I come back in September.
I was gonna say, was that the meeting you were gonna attend, or are you the month after?
Coming the first
September.
Thursday in September, yeah. I just can't come in August.
That's
The
okay.
oxygen levels are getting low in here.
It is hot in
I'm just worried
here.
about the heat.
Wow.
Another reason why to skip August. Or we can come every week. We can come twice a day.
You can be outside.
They
I
might
don't know,
have the AC
we actually have a
working.
schedule.
That's up to you guys. I just know I'll be back in
They've
September.
been working on the AC for about a month.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Really?
Like find somebody
Judy,
else.
thank you.
It ain't working.
It's good to see everybody again.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Judy.
much.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Judy.
This will be
you.
fun.
And we'll see you in September.
You'll see me on whatever it is, September, whatever.
Fifth.
First, thank you.
Drive
I will
careful.
remember this. It's in my calendar,
I'm
but,
sure you will.
Driving all the way back to.
no, I was going to.
I was going, oh.
And I called my husband and said, I'm staying up here tonight.
Found a
I am
nice
too
Airbnb.
tired. I just,
Smart move.
it's been a hell of a week. I spent yesterday in Nantucket, which you might think was a vacation day. It was
No.
not. It's sheer hell there. They took us on a tour of some of the coastal erosion areas. And there was a place, there was an overlook, that you used to be able to walk way out and see the bluffs and Sconset. It's gone. It's completely gone. You just kind of walk out a little bit and then it's straight down. The coastal erosion's unbelievable, so it was wild.
Was that reclaimed like 80, they did a lot of reclamation projects 80, 90 years ago. Was that a reclamation back 80 years ago?
No,
90?
it's just the erosion that's happening from the coast up against the bluffs. The
Yeah.
bluffs are giving way.
That might have been a reclamation project 80 years ago.
I don't know.
Going back to-
A lot of islands were done
All right.
100 years ago.
Moving right
All
along.
right, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, Judy.
Thank
Go
you.
in peace.
Have a nice evening.
Yes, take care. Bye-bye.
Take care, bye.
Okay. Before we leave, I have a few quick words here. This, as the Office of Planning and Development has told us, it is zoning amendment season. And we're also about 6 years into our master plan, and it's good to every so often look back at our master plan, look what goals we've accomplished and what we haven't accomplished. And so if for those of you who are newer to the board, we have our master plan, which ideally should be updated about every 10 years. And I think we've been doing pretty good at that. Not all towns keep up with that. So it's been about 6 years now. And this is a non-binding document where we lay out our vision of what we'd like to see in Plymouth, what is on the ground in Plymouth already, and what goals we have for implementing our vision. And so that's what's in there. Out of that, what we're supposed to do is kind of take that information, gotten through a lot of research and outreach and all that sort of stuff, and use that to make changes to our zoning ordinance, especially through zoning amendments at town meeting, but also any of our other regulations that we may have in town. And especially in the last few months, we've heard a lot of discussions, in fact, about places where our zoning ordinance and our vision do not necessarily match up with our master plan. Or I should say our master plan vision does not necessarily match up with our zoning ordinance. And we've heard a few very specific instances of that. But looking over those two documents, I know there are many more places as well. And I think for next meeting, which is a work session, it would be a good idea to, is that also when the ZBA is coming, or is that September?
The ZBA had asked for September.
September, okay. So this would be, I think, a good opportunity for us as a board to look at our master plan. If you've never read it before, take a look at it. If you have, I'm not gonna tell you how thoroughly to read, I know you're not gonna read every word of it, but like, take a look at our goals and our vision and our implementation goals.
August 1?
And see what we have to do to meet the goals that the town came together in this master plan to set forth for us. I mean, it wasn't just the board saying this stuff, it was with a lot of outreach and research. And I know I've got a list of some things, bigger and smaller, that come up. It includes the two things we just heard about tonight. We could return to a discussion of the Fairgrounds Road overlay or not, depending on how we feel about that. That is something on our master plan, not that exact overlay, but that is an opportunity for more housing there.
Can I say something, John?
There's the environmentally, in a moment, there's the environmentally sensitive zone, which we've been talking about, which we might want to look at, and whether remove and replace, or whatever that might be. There's a big problem with the way it's written. It's well-intentioned, not exactly that perfectly written. We've heard a lot of feedback from the public about storage units and how they're regulated or not in town. There's a lot of different stuff that we could talk about, and including some of the language we just got from Judy Barrett and Barrett Planning. So, as homework, since we don't have any applications to look at, I would encourage you to look at our master plan, and if you're ready to dig into both, even through a skim, our zoning ordinance as well, just to see what work do we have to do. There is a lot of work to do, and if we do want to get anything through this year, this is when you start. Comments, questions? Yeah, you want to get out of here?
You wanted to say something.
I was just gonna say,
Oh, that's
for
right, Mike.
someone that wanted the overlay on Fairgrounds Road to go through in the worst way, I just don't think there's the appetite for it.
Okay.
And I hate to see us turning our wheels on that. on this board.
You know, and maybe we can like meet next month and very quickly just say no. And I do just want to at least formally bring it up and see where we stand on it.
Sure.
And, because a lot of work did go into it and all that, and, yeah.
I'd like to learn about it before we discuss it. Where's the best way to do that?
You could probably send Joseph an email, he can send you the language, or it's probably available on the town's website somewhere still. But basically, it was, the short version, there was a section where basically water and sewer are on Fairgrounds Road, where we would have allowed, not taking any uses away that are currently there.
The overlay.
But being an overlay, if you want to instead, basically follow the zoning of the single-family residential,
Okay.
give or take, kind of,
Okay.
mostly, to allow for more housing density along water and sewer in a place that the master plan says will kind of be ripe for this.
Right.
That's basically what it was.
Okay, thank you.
And so that's what I'd like to do for next month, at our business meeting. It's been a long few days at our work session.
All right.
Have the AC fixed.
God, please. It's been how long now? Like
It's been a month
month and a half or
anyway,
something?
So that's
hasn't it?
They'll get it fixed in September.
August 1st.
I guess so, yeah. August 1, yeah.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Have
Hey.
a wonderful, oh, God.
Go home and have watermelon.
Except for Phil.